imagine the homework actually walk faster.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We started a minute late, but that's because Dan had a question. So I'm going to call him on the carpet a little bit. But I appreciate Dan coming up. Good evening, everybody. My name is Justin Harris, and I'm the section manager for the Community and Intergovernmental Engagement team at ADEQ. And I'll be facilitating the conversation this evening with assistance from Eric Hughes, who is the community liaison for ADEQ. We'd like to welcome and thank participants for attending and wanted to clarify that this is a community meeting and not a public hearing. That was actually some of what Dan was asking about. And there will be interaction tonight. We want to hear your questions and give answers to those questions. And we'll have a question and answer session after the presentation tonight. Also, wanted to let you know ADEQ is not accepting formal oral comments at this community meeting. Oral comments will be accepted at the formal public hearing, and that's going to be on August 21st, 2025. If you have written comments today, ADEQ will accept those. Also, ADEQ staff are focused on addressing community questions during this meeting tonight. If members of the media are present and have unanswered questions at the conclusion of this meeting, they can see Caroline Oppelman, who's right over here waving. Hi, Caroline. She's our communications director, and they can see her after the meeting. She can coordinate brief interviews on ADEQ efforts. This meeting is intended to cover the proposed air permit for aluminum dynamics, but we have water staff here to answer questions that we know you have about water quality. Moving forward, we want to be clear that we have a construction general permit for this site that covers stormwater, but no aquifer protection or Arizona pollutant discharge elimination systems permit application. Further, ADEQ does not have jurisdiction over planning and zoning or how much water the facility uses. I'm sure there are a lot of questions about that. We will have people that will be speaking to that tonight and ask questions about it. But this is predominantly an air quality permit meeting. Also, if I could just remind you, if you could turn your phones to vibrate, that would be great. Just a quick reminder there. And most importantly, we're here to listen to you and hear you as a community, and thank you all for attending. I did want to go over our agenda really quickly. You'll see that we've already covered, if you have your agendas in front of you, we've already covered the welcome and housekeeping. Housekeeping is coming up in just a moment too. But we're also going to have a presentation on the proposed air quality permit tonight, and we'll have that will take about 40 minutes. And then for about a couple of hours, we're going to have a question and answer session for you to ask your questions, and then we'll have some closing remarks at the end. So I want to go over our stated purpose. The stated purpose here is for all, that is ADEQ, the Benson community, and other stakeholders to provide information and answer questions related to the proposed ADEQ Class 1 air quality permit for aluminum dynamics in Benson, Arizona. We're going to take just a short little break here for us to hear from our air quality division director. His name is Daniel Chikolinsky, and so we'll go ahead and turn it over to Daniel at this point. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you, Justin. First of all, thank you for attending. I'm Daniel Chikolinsky, Air Quality Division Director at ADEQ. Appreciate you all showing up. Nice crowd. Hopefully we can answer all of these questions regarding aluminum dynamics, also known as ADI proposal permit. So we're here to listen to you. I'd also like to thank thank you, and also staff from the city of Benson are also here. As Justin already mentioned, this is an informal community meeting. We really want to hear questions from the community, right? We want to explain our process. We want to let you know what's going on. This is not part of the formal public comment, right? If you want to submit public comments, we will have some more information. There's information on the agenda on how to submit those public comments. We'll have some more information at the end of the meeting. As Justin said, we want a 40-minute presentation. We'll give you a project overview, ADEQ permitting process and authority, our community inspection and compliance process, we heard that you had some questions regarding water quality, so there are colleagues from the water quality division here. They have a short presentation and answer any water quality questions. If you could, please hold your questions to the end of the presentation. Smoother. And if you still want to comment, you go to the back room, Joaquin and Sam are back there, sign up to talk. For those that are standing around, there are a couple of empty seats over here if you want to come and grab a seat. With that,
Perfect. Thank you so much, Danny. So my staff has helped me put together, I usually just verbally go through these, but they thought it might be good for everybody to see these tips for a good meeting. And this is just something that we use to help the meeting to go in the best direction. So thank you so much for being willing to help us out with these things. So the first one is share from your experience and perspective. Also, please listen when others are speaking. Allow space for all to participate. What that means is just speak briefly, be focused, be on topic. Thank you for that. Also, be generous. We at ADEQ want to be open to community input, and we ask that you remain open also. So thank you so much. And then finally, we ask that all present try to be respectful and kind. We believe that this will lead to good outcomes. So thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to turn some time over to Aaron Tews, the community liaison in this area, and he's going to take us through some housekeeping items. Here you go.
Thank you, Justin and Daniel, for that introduction. As Justin mentioned, I am Aaron Tews. I'm your ADEQ community liaison, and I'm just here to better assist the public and the regulated community in reaching our agency. I'm going to cover a few housekeeping items first. In the back there are the restrooms. If you need to use the restroom, there's men's and women's restrooms in the back of the room. We have water also available in the back of the room near where you would sign to speak. And then we also have our emergency exits to the right and the left and in the back. I'm going to start with some items for the community. Please grab an agenda that will walk you through the order of events tonight. We also have all of our speakers on there that will be able to connect with us after the meeting. At the bottom of the agenda, you'll find the QR code and the link to our Smart Comment portal. That portal is where you can make informal comments. That's the most connected way. You can submit them. They're supposed to be related to the draft air permit, so we really like some air-focused questions for the forum. Near the agenda as well, we also have our community liaison and our air quality business cards. If you want to reach us anytime, we have email and phone. And also near there, we have the relevant fact sheet for this permit. We also have the draft air permit in a binder or a spiral. You can read that during this meeting. I can't take it all, but it is available online. Documents and the technical support documents are available online. And they are on our public notice page and our facility of interest page. You can look up either ADEQ public notice or ADEQ facility of interest. Please remember to sign in and check the box next to your name here on this sheet if you would like to receive email updates moving forward. This is how we reach you with further permitting information about this facility specifically. Here in the sign-in sheet, again, we have a separate speaker sign-up sheet over here. If you would like to speak to them, each person has 3 minutes to speak. We're going to call as many participants as time allows in the order they signed up. And we can address further inquiries with our staff after the meeting as well. We're going to have you folks stick around. If you did not get to answer your question, we're going to try to answer everybody that we possibly can. Again, for those who provide an email address and check the subscribe box here, we're going to be reaching out and we'll give you those updates. And with that, I'm going to return it to Justin Harris for our introduction.
Yeah, we're going to have a question and answer after the presentation. That would take us until past midnight. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that. Our end time tonight is 9 p.m. That's why we're asking people to sign up if they want to speak.
But that's the information that I got.
Oh, okay, I apologize that that happened. It is possible that if we have a need for it, we could potentially do a second meeting, but we're not going to go past. So let me say this. We can't be here all night, so I think you understand that. At 9 p.m., what's going to happen is we'll have some of our staff here able to answer questions just, towards the end, but we're not going to be staying all night long. And to get through this whole crowd would take that long. So that's the reason we're not doing that. Just to let you know. You know what? We'll consider that. And we'll let the city know, or we'll let the community know. Is what I meant. So yeah, no problem. Thank you for that question. All right, and thank you, Aaron, for going over those housekeeping items. Okay, I need to go through the folks that are here with us tonight. So you already heard from Daniel Chekalinsky. Thank you so much, Daniel. And we will have, in a few minutes here, Balaji Vaidyanathan, who is the Air Quality Division's Deputy Director. Yeah, if you'll stand up, Balaji, and just kind of identify who you are. And then Tim Pippinger, who is Manager of Air Permits and Compliance in the Air Quality Division. They'll be actually doing that presentation for us tonight. Bill Lindenberg, who is an Environmental Associate Engineer for Air Permits, is here. We also have Dr. Feng Mao, who's a Principal Environmental Engineer in Air Permits and Compliance. And then we also have Michael Burton, who's an Environmental Science Specialist, Air Permits and Compliance Unit. We also brought folks from our Water Division, as we said. So Randy Mattis is here with the Water Quality Division. He's the Division Deputy Director. We also have Josie Marissa, who's a Water Quality Division Deputy Director also. We have David Kim from Groundwater Mining and Industrial. He's the manager in that. And then we have Stacy Village, who's a Surface Water Manager. Kelly Williams, Permits Program Manager, Surface Water Protection. We have Tiffany Tom from our Office of Administrative Counsel. She's an attorney. And then we also actually have an intern from Office of Administrative Counsel, Alex Diggins. Alex, where are you at? He's in the very back, waving at everybody. All right. We also have Carolyn Appleton that I spoke of. She's our Director of Communications here tonight. And then with my team, we have Melissa Hayes, Community Engagement Planner. Melissa's in the back. Thank you, Melissa. Samantha Toes, our Community Liaison Unit Manager. She's new to our team. Welcome, Sam. We have Roxanne Lindsley, who's a Legislative Analyst. And I think she's in the back also. And then we have, or maybe she's up front, sorry. We have, let me see here, Joaquin Marufu, who is our Border Protection Unit. I think he's helping out in the back. And then Lee Ketchum came from our Information Technology Department to help us out tonight with the tech. Lots of folks here. We take this very seriously, just to let you know. We wanted to tell Benson Unified School District, thank you for facilitating this location. It was the largest space that we could find here, and we did rent it from them, but thank you so much for making that available for us. So that is all the introductions. I'm sorry that took a little bit of time. So we're going to get into the presentations here. And as I said, Balaji Vaidyanathan is going to be presenting, Tim Pippinger, and then we'll have Randy Mattis and Josie Marissa helping us out on the water side. Balaji is the Deputy Director in the Air Quality Division for ADEQ. He's been with ADEQ for 27 years and has managed air quality programs for more than 20 years. He has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and a master's degree in industrial management. Tim Pippinger serves as the Air Permitting and Compliance Section Manager. Tim has been with ADEQ since 2021. Prior to his current role, Tim was the Groundwater Protection Section Manager. Tim has a bachelor's in environmental science from the University of Idaho and is an Air Force veteran, so thank you, Tim, for your service. Randy Mattis serves as a Deputy Director in the Water Quality Division at ADEQ. Randy's been with ADEQ for 20 years in a wide range of leadership roles. Currently, he oversees the implementation of the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Aquifer Protection Program, and previously has led the hazardous waste, solid waste, underground storage tank, and planning and outreach sections. Randy holds a bachelor's degree in biology from Southern Illinois University. And then Josephine Marissa, last but not least, definitely not least, serves as a Deputy Director in the Water Quality Division at ADEQ, overseeing programs of the Clean Water Act. She's been with ADEQ for over 4 years now, and holds both a master's degree and a law degree from Vermont Law School. So that was a lot of words. I really apologize for having to take that time, but I think it was important to know who's speaking to you tonight. So we're going to start into the presentation now, starting with Balaji. We asked that you hold your remarks until the end of the presentation, and as I said, we'll be having a question and answer session after the presentation. So go ahead, Balaji.
Thank you, Justin. Good evening to all of you, and a warm welcome to our community meeting. By way of introduction, my name is Balaji. I'm a Deputy Director in the Airport Division, and our objectives today in this community meeting is twofold. One, we want to be able to offer up transparency in our technical and legal rationale in the whole permitting process. And secondly, I want to kind of help explain some of the opportunities available to you, be able to make public comments, and be part of the process as we proceed to make an eventual final decision on the permit. We want you to be part of the process. So the way we have the slides kind of set up today is I start off by giving you a very high-level overview of the project. Then I spend some time to talk about some permitting concepts. And from that point on, we do a little bit of discussion about compliance. And air compliance is kind of a back half piece to the permitting process. To the extent that this facility ends up getting a permit, ends up getting built and operated, when we issue a permit, we need to have these layers of protection, whereby we have a system to be able to observe the operations, review reports, and ensure that the facility is fully being compliant with their permit. So that's what the compliance part of will involve. And at the end of it all, we open it up for an informal Q&A session. Whatever questions you may have, we try our best to respond to. First off, we do a little bit of the project overview. Aluminum Dynamics is proposing to build a new recycled aluminum processing plant in the Benson area, in the intersection of Highway 80 and 7th Street. And the proposed facility will sit on approximately 220 acres of land. And obviously, as all of you are acutely aware, it sits in close proximity to the Benson community. So next, I have a fairly high-level schematic of what kind of process it will employ. And the process for the company will begin with what is called a scrap handling. The very first step in the process, obviously, is the incoming raw material. This mostly post-consumer aluminum scrap, basically cans and more cans coming in, and they will be pushed through what's called a bale breaker. So bale breaker essentially will break the material into manageable sizes and also to make it more homogeneous. Now, once you get through that process, before I go to the next step, this process has the ability to create particulate matter emissions. So for that, the company will be required to employ what's called a baghouse. A baghouse is control technology to reduce emissions. And what I'll do in the next slide is to offer a more detailed discussion of how a baghouse will operate. Once the material gets past the scrap handling process, it will go to what's called a decoder. And what the decoder does is it involves the use of a rotary kiln. And to the extent that there are solvents or lacquers or enamels on top of the material, the whole objective of the process is to be able to drive those contaminants away. And this activity again has the potential for some air emissions. So not only will this process have a baghouse like I talked about in the earlier step, it will also have what's called a lime injection system. And a lime injection system is really a control method for a different kind of pollutant. It's called hydrogen chloride. And I'll talk about hydrogen chloride a lot more in the slides to come. But once the process happens with the decoder, the material then goes on into one or two parallel lines. They're called the melting furnaces. And the objective here is twofold. One of them is to melt the raw material into molten aluminum. And then additionally, on top of it, it involves the addition of certain chemical compounds to take away the impurities from the material. Right? So we try to increasingly get to a cleaner form of aluminum as we go through the process. And again, just like before, this process step also involves control devices to limit emissions, and that is a combination of baghouse technology and the lime injection process. Subsequent to the melting furnaces, the material will then go through what's called a folding furnace. And the folding furnace fulfills a very similar function to the melting furnace. The objective again is to use chemical compounds to drive impurities away and essentially get to a more refined version of the mineral. And again, same concept, well controlled, bag houses and lime injection. From that step on, the material then goes through what is called a degasser. And what a degasser does is, you pump through argon gas, and you're trying to expel any dissolved hydrogen molecules in the material. Right? And once you finish that step, you're now getting to a very pure version of the aluminum material. And it is then sent to what is called the casting process. Essentially, the casting process is where they are shaped, and they are shaped in these large rectangular slabs. Some of them are as heavy as 30 tons. And then that is the ultimate product of commerce for the industry. And that's what leaves the facility, either through trucks or through railroads, and they get shipped over to their sister plant in Columbus, Mississippi. So next, I want to take a minute or two to talk about the controls. You probably heard me mentioning bag house and line injection multiple times before. But what are they? So in the schematic that I showed, towards the very bottom left, you see the incoming process gas. And what that means is, it is the gases that are produced by the actual process, whether it's the decoder or the melting furnace or the holding furnace. These are the emissions that are coming out the process. And what lime injection does is, it uses a chemical compound. It's calcium oxide. And the calcium oxide reacts with the hydrogen chloride, which is the pollution compound. And you are trying to form a benign salt. So you take what is supposed to be some of the toxic pollutant, and you're reacting it to form something that is much more benign. So that's the hydrogen chloride control. From this step, the gas is then passed to what is called a bag house. And the bag house is essentially a series of bags, and the gases kind of flow through the bag house, to the bags. So they flow from the bottom, and as they flow upwards, and they hit the walls of the bags, the chemical particles kind of, when they hit the walls, they can drop down. So that's really the purification technique. So as you run through all these bags, and the gases can come out, you get to a significantly purified version of the gas going out. And bag houses are extremely commonplace technology. They've been around for decades, and they are relatively easy to manage. The thing about bag houses that we watch out for is, are they kept in good working order? Are there any rips or tears in the bags? Right? So that's an important step. And as long as the bag houses are maintained very effectively, the levels of control that you expect to achieve with them is very, very high. Sometimes upwards of 99% control. So I want to provide a context before I move on to the next slide. Next, I want to pivot into a conversation around air quality permitting. And the very first thing that I'll probably do is to talk about the overall timeline. And for us, with this application from Aluminum Dynamics, we got the application back in November of last year. And one of the very first steps in the permitting process is for our permit this year, is to look at the process in great detail and figuring out, okay, what are the potential air emission sources in the process. That's the very first step. Once we get past that, we got to say, okay, these emission units, what kind of emissions are we expecting for them to have? Right? And this is down to the lines of various engineering algorithms. And once we estimate the emissions, then we engage in a very substantive and rigorous process to emphasize public health protection. And this is done through a process called air dispersion modeling. And I'll touch on air dispersion modeling in a lot more detail as I move forward. And once we get past this whole emission estimation idea and the public health protection angle, we get down to the gas tax and hydrogen permit. And the permit is a legally enforceable document, so it contains a lot of different requirements. It gives you conditions on how different things need to be operated. It talks about what kind of control, air pollution controls need to be implemented. It also talks about what kind of monitoring conditions, reporting conditions, and testing conditions the permitting has to fulfill. Right, this is the compliance part that I discussed before. The permit done effectively is to ensure these representations are suitably codified and they're being made enforceable to the permit. So that's what we do with the permit. And the technical support document is kind of a complementary, kind of a plain English version of the permit. Kind of provides you more simple context on what the permit contains. And so this entire process of coming up with a permit can take as many months to put together. As far as this permit goes, Lee Street, we talked to, I believe, the hospital's rehab center, that's not too far away. We talked to members of the school district at one point. And then I think we talked to a few select members within the community who had reached out to us to respond to some questions. And then aside from that, we put out a mailer. Sometime in the early part of May, we put out a document along with the utility bill that went out. And essentially to communicate, hey, we have an application from this company, we're processing a permit, and there are upcoming public comment opportunities that are forthcoming, so we mentioned that. And then we realized that when the mailers went out, that the mailers don't go to people obviously who are in the paperless billing kind of format. So that was, we didn't know that. So in July, we did another mailer, and in this opportunity, not only did we send out the physical mailers to as part of the utility bill, but we also had the utility department email the people who are signed up for the paperless billing to get a copy of the fact sheet or mailer document. So we've done a few things to get the word out there in the community along the way, which brings us to where we are right now. So where we are right now is smack dab in the middle of the public comment process. We commenced public notice on this permit back on the 16th of July, and here we are today in this informal setting, the community meeting for us to answer questions. And like I mentioned before by Justin and Daniel, the public comment here will officially end with a formal public hearing. But that hearing is very different. It's on the record, and use a court reporter to transcribe and record all comments made, and every oral comment made in that meeting or that hearing is considered to be formal record, and we will respond to every one of those comments. And then once the public comment period kind of wraps up, we kind of assimilate all of the comments, everything, whatever we've heard orally, whatever came through by email, whatever came through to us as a hard copy, or comments that came through to us through what we call our smart comment portal, the ADEQ website. All of those, they all get the same level of deference from us. So we then work for possibly many months to put together what we call a formal response summary. So that is kind of all formal response to all of your public comments. And when we are all wrapped up with that document is transmitted to everybody who provide official formal comment. And at the same exact time, we will transmit the pertinent documents and the responses summary to the federal government. It is the EPA Region 9 office in San Francisco, and because of the kind of permit this is, it will go through their review for 41 days. It's legally mandated. And they get to tell us at the end of the 41-day review period whether they either agree with our permit or they object to the permit. So unless we are able to obtain a confirmation that they agree with the permit, we are unable to issue the permit. So the whole point being, there's still long ways to go for this permit process to happen. From here, I kind of pivot on to some high-level permitting topics. So, as a permitting program, we issue permits to stationary source of industrial pollution. And these activities, if they have emissions above a certain threshold level, they are going to require a permit from us. And permits are of different types. There's something called a major source permit or a class 1 permit, and there's something called a minor source permit or a class 2 permit. And generally speaking, this designation is driven by the level of emissions that the project has. And the third piece to this is when we write a permit and we propose a permit, the Public Health Protection Board of it is front and center for us. So I'm going to spend a lot of time here to talk about the whole air dispersion modeling concept and how we came to the conclusion in the permitting process that the impact from this project are going to be protective of public health. So first off, permit applicability. So this is again based on a concept called potential to emit. And potential to emit in our world is really the maximum capacity for an emission unit to emit a certain kind of pollutant when they are running on a 24/7 basis, running all the time, operating all the time. And then additionally, under the physical design and operation design, and also with any restrictions that the permit imposes. For example, if the permit says you've got to operate a baghouse, that function of the baghouse has to be part of that potential to emit estimation. So that's what we've done here. So with respect to aluminum dynamics, we've been very careful to look at the entirety of the process, identify every single potential emission point, and with the best resources available to us, we able to quantify what those emissions are likely to be. So when we evaluated those emissions, this is the conclusion that we came to. So in this table, I present what we call potential to emit for multiple pollutants that the facility will emit. And I won't go through every one of them, but I want to draw your attention to one pollutant more towards the bottom. It is hydrogen chloride. And you will see the potential to emit value of 92.3 tons per year of emissions. And the major source threshold for that pollutant is 10 tons per year. So because of the fact that the emissions of that pollutant is above the major source threshold, this facility automatically has to obtain what we call a major source class 1 permit. So I just want to establish that, so that's what we are processing for this facility at this time. And also, if you're reading up on permitting elsewhere, you may even be able to term Title 5 permit. So Title 5 permit is another interchangeable concept when you refer to a class 1 or a major source permit. From here, I will pivot on and spend quite a bit of time on this whole idea of public health protection. And for us, this whole idea of public health starts with this concept called National Ambient Air Quality Standards. It's an acronym that goes by NAAQS. These are federally defined standards which are designed for public health protection. And it's designed for public health protection for sensitive population. Whether it's young children or older people or people with compromised respiratory system, it is meant to protect all those classes of people. And they are designed for a class of pollutants called criteria pollutants, and there are 6 of them, and you will see them in the image below. Ozone is one of them, nitrogen oxide is one of them, lead, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and then particulate matter. And when I talk about particulate matter, I'll probably emphasize a little bit more on it because you see something called PM10 and PM25 in the slide. And essentially what that means is when you talk about PM10, that is dust that is not a size or a diameter below the 10 microns. So these are small particles. And then when we talk about PM2.5, these particles are 2.5 microns or so. They're much smaller than even the PM10. And if you're wondering in your mind, hey, what exactly does the micron concept mean? I have an image for you on the right, which is an illustration of, for example, you see a blown-up image of a human hair. The diameter of the human hair is approximately between 50 and 70 microns. And so when you think about this as a frame of reference, you can understand that the PM that we are talking about and what we are concerned about is very, very small. These are the kinds of particles that have the ability to, not well controlled, to kind of go through us and cause respiratory issues. So I talked about what these national ambient standards are, but how does the process do justice to it? That's the question, right? So I will talk about this in 2 different questions. Why do we do modeling? Modeling is done because nationwide, that is the singular approach to figuring out what any brand new facility, how those facilities' emissions impact the communities around them. And when you model, you are able to take these model values and you're able to compare them against the ambient standards that I talked about before. So you have a comparison, you say, hey, I'm looking at every one of these pollutants and they are truly protected because they're below where they need to be. That's the conclusion that you want to arrive at. Your permit has to move forward. And what is modeling, right? So modeling at a simple level is a mathematical simulation. We are trying to figure out, okay, you have pollution from a project like aluminum dynamics. How does that pollution move with space and distance? That's what we're trying to come up with. That's what the simulation is all about. And how do we do it is by taking emissions data, which I talked about before, where we calculate emissions for every single activity. And then we use what we call meteorological data. Whether it's wind speed or wind direction, those are key parameters that you need to look at to see how is the pollution going to move from your project onto the nearby community. Right? That's what we're planning to do. So taking this into a step further and talking about the whole science of it, we use and all permitting programs across the country and the federal government is same model. It's called ADEQ. It's kind of the gold standard for air dispersion modeling. And essentially, the model is able to take on multiple different inputs. Obviously, the emission information from the plant are critical. We need to get them right. Secondly, the meteorological data, like I said, the wind speed, the wind phenomena is important. And thirdly, the topography. Are we talking about flat terrain? Are we talking about terrain that's up and down? Those are very important in simulations in the model. So you input all of those correctly in the model. The model spits out what's called a model concentration. So the model concentration is truly a measure of the impact from the project-driven emissions. Okay. So that's only one part of the model. So what we do is we take the modeling concentration from the model, but then we overlay that on top of what's called a background concentration. A background concentration is a concentration that may be pre-existing in this area, right? So there may be other activities that happen, maybe vehicle traffic that happens, and there may be some level of background pollution already. And the thing that we got to be careful about is you're taking a reasonable background, and then you're overlaying the model concentration on top of it. And the sum total of both of it has to be below the ambient standard we are compared with. That is the test. And that's what we went through very rigorously with the company. And essentially, these are the results from the model. Right? For the criteria pollutant that I mentioned before, here are the different pollutants, and I will not go through the rows one by one, read the results. But I will draw your attention to the fact that there are multiple columns. There is a model concentration, there is a background concentration, and there is a total concentration, some total of both of those. And the total concentration, ideally, you want it to be below the corresponding ambient standard. And when you look at this table right here, for every one of the pollutants in this model, the total concentration is below the NAAQS. And that is important because without that step happening correctly, the permit cannot move forward. So from here, I want to pivot on to discussing different classes of permit, and these are called hazardous pollutants. And these are also established by the federal government, by the EPA, and there is about 180 different pollutants. I'm not implying that all 180 are being emitted by this facility. I'm just saying that's the full spectrum of what EPA has got. And the one thing I should mention is aluminum is not one of them. So I know that there's been a lot of concerns within the community about aluminum exposure to the dust. I just want to be clear that within the structure of the air quality program and air quality regulations, both at the state level and the federal level, aluminum is not directly a hazardous air pollutant. But I got to explain that a little bit more. When I say that aluminum is not directly regulated, it is definitely indirectly regulated. So when you talk about aluminum as part of the dust from the facility, the permit, as I talked about, has very prescriptive pollution control applications. Multiple, top level controls like houses that should have the effect of minimizing and limiting emissions at a very significant level. So by having a beneficial effect on the particulate matter emission profile, you indirectly influence the aluminum dust profile. Because you control the PM, you control aluminum. indirectly. That's the idea. Right? So that being said, I should maybe explain that. So with these hazards there are no clear-cut ambient standards that we can use to compare. Now I talked about the previous class of pollutants called criteria pollutants, where they have these standards called the NACs. For the HABs, there is no real standard per se. But that being said, we spend a lot of time doing dispersion modeling work and compare the facilities impacts to commonly accepted health guidelines, not standards, but guidelines that are available both at a state level and a federal level. So we spend a lot of time with that, and that's what I'm going to touch on in the next slide. One of the key things to remember is, we understood, the location of the facilities related to the community. That was a big part of our analysis. So we focused a lot of effort on very specific locations in the community. The nursing home across the street, the hospital's rehab center, the schools, the location where we are right now. Those are all very, very important considerations for us. So I'm going to present you some of the results that we got. So in this image, I show you the impacts for hydrogen chloride, which is really the pollutant of concern for this facility. And right up top, you see the reference to short-term exposure. And if you're wondering what short-term exposure means, it refers to a 1 hour time scale. And the reason for the 1 hour time scale is because the ambient guidelines for hydrogen chloride, both at the state level and the federal level, are 1 hour concepts. So we wanted to keep the comparison the same. So we modeled on a 1 hour basis. And the biggest takeaways that I want to convey to you is, when you look at the model results, and these concentrations are all in milligrams per cubic meter. That's the unit. And you see the value within the aluminum dynamics footprint. You see the value of 0.13. And 0.13 is the highest model concentration on a short-term basis from this facility. And it happens right by the fence line. And that number, if you compare against the actual guideline, which are all that, is a fraction of that value. Both the state guideline and the federal guideline, they're a fraction of it. And the other big takeaway is, and this is important, as you get farther from the facility, the impacts start tapering with distance. So you see the concentrations of the nursing home, and then you maybe look at the concentration in the school, you see the concentrations keep diminishing. And every one of these values that we modeled, I want to just kind of reiterate this, are well below the corresponding guideline. So that was one part of the evaluation. The next one it's a very similar looking map, but this is more designed for long-term exposure. And by long-term exposure, what I mean is there is sustained exposure to the facility's operations for a span of an entire year. And how do you evaluate that, right? So same concept, you see the maximum model concentration value, milligram per cubic meter, right at the fence line. And get all the way to other sectors, including the nursing home or the school. The concentrations keep diminishing. And even with the highest concentrations, they are well below the guideline that we benchmarked against. So kind of, it gave us this understanding that, obviously, we understand the significance of what's happening with respect to proximity to the community, and we will talk in great detail further on about mechanisms we have in place to limit these emissions. But to the extent that we are being able to hold the facility to their expected level of emissions, these are the impacts that we expect to see. And these are the impacts that we are expecting you to be possibly receiving. And I just want to kind of reiterate that these are showing compliance with these guideline values. So there's been a lot of questions that we've heard as to whether this air permit is already final. And if it's final already, why are you guys meeting with us? Right? So I'm here to show you that this permit is far from a done deal. We are actively in the public comment period. We are very receptive to feedback, welcome feedback. We think that we have put a best foot forward with our work on the permit. the level of engineering that has gone in, the level of modeling science that has gone in, but we are not perfect. So we welcome feedback, and if there are opportunities for us to improve on this permit and make it better, we are all ears. So I just want to show you that. And also the other thing to keep in mind is, every single public comment will be responded to formally, and this permit cannot go final until the time that EPA has weighed in and has given us the approval to be able to issue the permit. So that said, establishing that you still have the ability to comment and influence the permit, what kind of comments will be truly persuasive, right? And I mean this sincerely as guidance. Obviously, there could be a number of concerns and grievances in the community, but there are certain issues that are kind of outside our wheelhouse. For example, when we talk about zoning or light or noise, certainly I think we very much empathize that there could be genuine concerns for the community, but under the air quality permitting program, legal structure, those are not actionable concepts for us, right? So that's one point that I want to make. The next point is saying that there are also other aspects of the permit that should be commented on, which should be incredibly meaningful for us. For example, you point out a technical error. Somebody looks at these calculations and say, you guys misplaced a decimal point, and this number is wrong, right? That's obviously a very significant error on our part, which we have to go back and remedy. The second thing is we missed out the regulation completely. So there was a federal regulation that applied to this kind of an activity, and we just flat out missed it. We hope not, but if you missed it, your feedback would be incredibly valuable. And the last thing is, you have a concern with the scientific principles that we use in our permitting action. So I talked at length about the air dispersion modeling process. It is an extremely nuanced engineering evaluation, a scientific exercise. And if you believe that we made some fatal flaws in how the modeling is conducted and the results are presented, we want to hear about that, right? And the more documentation you provide, explaining your rationale on why our permitting process is flawed, it is going to make those comments that much more actionable. So I just want to provide this context, and I think the last one is because absolutely new information that is available to you that we were not aware of, and you make it available to us, certainly that can be part of the evaluation step. So again, just want to emphasize again, we want to hear from you. We want to influence our project. Right? We are very, very engaged in that process. And to the extent that you can focus your comments on air quality concerns, it's going to make the process that much more robust for us. So at this case, I'm just going to pause. I want to thank you all for your patience in listening to me. I will turn it over to my colleague, Tim Benson, to talk about the compliance motions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. As Justin mentioned earlier, I just presented the air permitting compliance. I'm going to speak to you this evening about compliance requirements for the draft permit. So this draft permit, there are several compliance requirements, including operating requirements, ambient air monitoring, and safety testing. Operating requirements include operating control devices such as baghouses and alignment junction that all we spoke about earlier. Operation, maintenance, and monitoring plans. These are long-term plans to ensure the facility is operating as intended. The line injection rate monitoring, again, as Paul mentioned, this line injection is important to mitigate hydrogen chloride. Charge and feed rate monitoring, that is the rate from which material is being processed in the facility. And opacity monitoring. Opacity monitoring is a physical evaluation of emissions from a statute. Ambient air monitoring. This is a very important subject. This is not something that is required by federal law, state law, statute, but it is something that ADEQ is requiring within this draft permit. So thermodynamics would be required to operate a network of monitors throughout Benson that would monitor for hydrogen chloride. This is done for several reasons: to evaluate real-time the hydrogen chloride levels, as well as to provide historical data. This will give us actual data to work off of in real time, and we'll have responses based off set alert levels based on certain concentrations. So as also mentioned earlier, the EPA guideline is 2.7 milligrams per cubic meter, and so the alert levels have been drafted into this permit. At 2 milligrams per cubic meter, ADI will be required to notify ADEQ within 24 hours and begin a root cause analysis of this exceedance. If levels then continue to rise and reach 2.5 milligrams per cubic meter, all operations will be immediately required to cease. They can only restart the facility after completing appropriate corrective actions identified from that root cause analysis and ensuring that HCl levels will no longer be that high. In addition, this draft permit requires performance testing. Federal rules require performance testing once every 5 years. This draft permit requires quarterly performance testing, so that it's 20 tests per permit cycle as opposed to the 1 test that's currently required under rule. If they are below 50% of their limit within the permit for 8 consecutive tests, then they may drop to semi-annual performance testing. But if any of those tests exceed the 50% threshold, they would stick with quarterly testing. There's also an annual performance test for particulate matter, VOCs, nitrogen oxide, and carbon monoxide. In addition to the draft permit compliance, ADEQ has a robust compliance and enforcement program. This includes unannounced inspections, performance testing oversight, compliance reporting, excess emission and permit deviation review, emission inventory, and complaint response. Permit compliance does not stop with just the permit. There is an entire compliance unit that will follow this facility for its life. On the screen is the contact information for both myself, Apology, and Bill, who's the permit writer, and then Aaron Choos, the community liaison. If there's any media that have questions, the PIO, Public Information Officer, can get addressed that way. I know that there's been a lot of questions about water quality as well, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Randy Mattis, Deputy Director of Water Quality.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having us in your community tonight. This turnout is truly amazing. This is such an important process, and it works when it's going to happen. So you should all be very proud about your community. This is really important that you're seeing tonight. So I'm going to talk about the Aquifer Protection Program. So what this is a program that protects Arizona's public health and the environment through ensuring that any discharges to the ground or to the aquifers meet certain standards that prevent those aquifers from being polluted. Most commonly, this program regulates industries such as mines and wastewater treatment plants. But it is really anybody who discharges anything to the surface of the land or injects anything into the land that exceeds standards where there's a potential of that to reaching aquifers. So it's really focused on the aquifer quality. When we look at Aluminum Dynamics as a company and what they're planning to do at their facility, they're planning to actually discharge their processed water to the sanitary sewer that flows to the city of Benson's wastewater treatment plant. Up here on the slide, I have just kind of a brief example of sanitary sewer, right? So you've got your houses, you've got your businesses, you've got your industrial individuals in your community here discharging to your sanitary sewer. That all goes to the wastewater treatment plant, and that's the point where the regulation comes into play with the Aquifer Protection Program permit. Because that's where that material will either be discharged into a basin, injected to the ground, treated and reused, right? That's where all that treatment and everything happens. So in this instance, when we look at the Aquifer Protection Program permit, Aluminum Dynamics themselves will not need a permit because they do not plan to actually discharge anything to the surface of the land or into the aquifer. But this material will be regulated as it goes through the sanitary sewer, ends up the city of Benson's wastewater treatment plant, and we regulate it under that permit, which, as you all are aware, that plant's been there for a long time, and that permit for a long time, so that permit is already in place. And with that, I would pass it on to just Melissa to talk about service.
Thanks, Randy. quality division at ADEQ. So I'm going to walk you through one of the many programs within our division that works to protect surface water within the state. So authorized by the Federal Clean Water Act, the Arizona Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or ZIPDs permits, protect Arizona's surface waters. So these permits place strict limits on all pollutants discharged into protected surface water through a point source in the state. So a point source is broadly defined but are common things as pipes, ditches, channels, or other conveyances. For additional information on which water bodies are considered those protected surface waters in Arizona, we have resources on our website, including a GIS map. Again, available on our website for your use. So in terms of who needs a permit, if a facility anticipates discharging into one of those protected surface waters, they are required to apply and be issued an ZIPDs permit prior to discharge. Our most common permittees are facilities such as wastewater treatment plants, mines, and construction sites. And a permit is typically issued for a period of 5 years. So in terms of the types of permits we have, there are 2 types, individual and general permits. So these are different types of permits available through the ZIPDs program. And the type of industry and operation at each facility determines the permit that we need. So individual permits are custom written, and they are specific to a facility type and a specific type of discharge. General permits can be a number of types, and they are outlined on the slide behind me. So again, that is for a specific group or type of permit or discharge. So to sum up, these ZIPDs permits are intended to maintain surface water quality in the state of Arizona and protect our precious water resource. So for any questions, please feel free to contact our ZIPDs staff or come talk to us after the presentation. And a quick note about the ADI facility. So ADEQ received an application from ADI for a construction general permit, which was issued in February of 2025. So to be very clear, this permit only covers stormwater discharges related to the construction activities. It does not authorize or relate to any future operational discharges from the facility. Should the facility plan to discharge into a protected surface water, they would be required to apply and receive an individual ZIPDs permits. However, as mentioned before, based on the information provided to us at this time by the company, we do not anticipate the need for such a permit, as ADI has indicated that they will be utilizing the city Benson sewer system, as was again mentioned before. So, again, to sum up, if you have any questions about the ZIPDs or Clean Water Act permits, feel free to reach out to my staff or come talk to us after the presentation. I'll turn it over back to Justin.
All right, thank you, Josie. So thank you to the team that presented tonight. Thank you, Balaji and Tim and Randy and Josie. Really appreciate the comments. Hopefully those were helpful to the community. Just a quick reminder, we do foresee this meeting ending at 9 p.m. As we talked about earlier, but we will have our staff around after the meeting for a bit in order to answer questions and have conversations with the community. So as we get into the question and answer portion of this meeting, I just wanted to do a little bit of level setting before we get into it, just to set expectations. We prefer that questions remain about the presentations that have just been given this evening, so that we can consider any questions you have towards the permit for aluminum dynamics. A quick reminder that zoning is not part of the air quality purview. If a previous speaker has asked a question, we refer to questions to consider those towards the permit. And then also, all statements have equal weight. Asking questions multiple times does not add weight to those questions. Some of the questions you may have tonight regarding health issues may not be covered, but we can confer with the Arizona Department of Health Services and answer those questions or find answers to those questions. And we'll be recording those questions here for referral. Also, we're asking you to keep your questions to 3 minutes apiece at a maximum, and we'll be giving a friendly reminder on that. So we have a speaker order that Aaron is going to be helping us out with from those who have signed up. And we'll just have 3 people on deck at a given time. So Aaron, can you please let us know who the first 3 people are actually aligned with that? Okay, yeah. Okay. It looks like our first 3 people, and let me just explain, as you want to make a comment or if your name is called, again, I'll call 3 names. First person, if they can come up, I'll turn over the mic, and then those 3 minutes will start, and then we'll let people answer the questions we have. So it looks like our first 3 people that are on deck are Mrs. Shepard, Dan Sprinkle, and Joe Townsend. So Mrs. Shepard. Come on up.
Given that you went through the due diligence of oil and checked the area as far as where that's going to be positioned, we are not obviously just Benson people. These are farmers, these are hardworking people, and there was a lot of really technical talk for some of them. So I'm sure some of them are going to need a little more from you as far as a more layman terms and clear things up a little bit. I have a husband in the industry dealing with the line system, and he may speak to this in a moment, but it is a very good system. And as working at Anheuser-Busch for 40 years, has never found any cancers or any of his own personal system or any area around him. I see what people are, it is proximity to the river is very important, but clear that up like right in the bridge slides with it going into the wastewater system. It is not going to come into our river. It is not going to come into our soil. In comparison of ADEQ, the only money that's coming in, are they gross polluters in any other states? Do we have numbers from any other states to compare that to? And what sort of thing should we be on the lookout for if that is a problem? And obviously, we have not okayed this permit. That was like, I read that clearly that the EPA must sign off.
So the question I heard was, are they gross polluters in any other state? Did I miss any other questions? Or was that mainly the question? Okay, thank you for your comments. And do we want to put that to water, or does that need to go to air on the gross polluters? Because you talked a lot about water there, but I think the question should go to air because this is an air permit meeting. So are they gross polluters in any other states, and do we have any information about that from the other states?
Thank you for the question. So we're aware of the parent company having some violations in other states, right? Whether the gross polluters or not, that's a judgment. And, their compliance system outside of the state of Arizona or outside of the facility, it's not something that we consider that each facility permit application is reviewed and processed under those specific terms of that application. We do have a robust compliance and inspection process in place, so if the facility is operating the state on compliance, we're going to do that with the state appropriate course of action.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Just a quick check, do we have the time clock that we have up? I can keep it myself, but I thought we were going to do that. It's okay, I will do it. And thank you so much, Mr. Shepard, for staying within those 3 minutes. Maybe Ms. Shepard is better, I don't have your first name, so it's okay. Yeah. Dan, you can come on up, and I'll go ahead and start with your minutes.
So my first question, Randy, I think we have a problem here because you said that the water is going to be discharged into the sewer, but we have Bill Ways, the operations manager, on video saying we're going to discharge gray water to our golf course. Doesn't that require a permit? And isn't that going into our soil?
Yeah,
If they deviate from discharge into the sewer and directly create gray water as opposed to generating effluent from the wastewater treatment plant that's then used for the golf course, absolutely they would come back into permitting. So if they deviate from discharge into the sanitary sewer and discharge it the other way to the surface of the land, we would have to look at it and they may require it.
Like I'm saying, he's on record saying. So that's something before we go forward that needs to be looked at. And I'm glad you asked your question, I was following you because according to him, they're going to get the aluminum, but I think let's throw the water into our soil. Other question I have so many after this discussion here. Can I turn?
Absolutely.
When you mentioned about collecting data for modeling, did you collect your own data or did ADEQ provide it?
So when we look at modeling, we talk about the inputs. So the emission information is given by the company. There's no. So,
Well, at least still a minute.
the way the president talks was the application to the company explains the emissions, the estimates, and it shows where the engineering estimates are coming from. And this is what is important. When we get an application, we are not just accepting information from an applicant at face value. We do our own due diligence. We got a PhD sitting there, we have a couple of teams here. So we review the information. That is something that they submit a marketing protocol and they explain to us how the marketing will be run. So we have a large input in how the marketing is run. Whether it's talking about what evidence we use from collected data or is it the wind direction, all of that, everything is pretty constructive.
What about, I'm running out of time, what about location? Because we have a document, and I would have to phone a friend, but I don't remember what document it was, but it actually stated that some of the data was collected in Tucson, I believe it was Craycroft the 22nd. That's over 35 miles away. That has nothing to do with Benson. So can you answer that?
Absolutely, thanks for that. So I think you're referring to the meteorological data. So under federal law, there are multiple different ways which you can process meteorological data for any projects. One of them is actually collecting on-site data. That is one avenue, but that is not the only avenue. There is also the other avenue where there is natural reserve stations in somewhat close proximity. And proximity is not like half a mile, or even be farther away, it would still be acceptable, just be making demonstrations. And then there is a third option called agnostic data. That is actually mathematically modeled data. And again, the way the process goes, the way the regulations are, we just don't accept the data because they propose it. They propose agnostic data, but we do a very rigorous evaluation called model performance evaluation. Because we are trying to ensure that the data that was generated from this data, by comparing with other regional markets, we are able to establish that the data is truly accurate and representative for this nation. That's what we do.
So collecting it in Tucson is acceptable.
No. So the way the model works is it engineers the data for the exact site in Benson. Okay? But then what you do is you expand the modeling grid, the data grid, you go all the way to Tucson. So if you stay with me, you are mathematically recreating the data for Tucson, okay, through this computer process. But then you have actual data in Tucson. So you are taking this mathematically generated data and comparing the actual data to say, oh, there is very, very strong correlation between the two. And only when that happens can you affirm that what we produce for this data is truly representative. That's what we meant. And we talked about this in a lot of detail, it was very, very technical, but we discussed it in detail to get this report out.
Well, I appreciate your honesty that ADEQ provided you with your modeling data, and I'm glad that the crowd got to pick that. Thank you.
Also, I would appreciate feedback later on whether you feel like the things that were broken down work on layman's terms. That actually is a really good point. And we want to make sure that we're doing a good job on that. Our director, Karen Peters, wants us to be doing that and making it understandable for folks. It's a bit of a balance because people want to know the science behind these things, but then also you have to be careful not to make it so technical that people can't understand it and it doesn't do any good at coming to these meetings. So thank you for that comment. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to burn the time. We have Joe Townsend coming up next. Come on up, Joe. And then it looks like Catherine is coming right after him. So.
My first question is a process question. So my first question is a process question. Does the time for giving answers count against my time for asking questions? Because I have a bunch of questions.
No, the answers are, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Joseph Townsend. I am the president of Benson United, which is a local nonprofit that exists partially to fight this smelting fund. So my first question is, does ADEQ give any weight or consideration to public opposition to the proposed facility? Was it simply a matter of if the application meets the requirements, the permit is granted regardless of the public's opposition? Is public participation merely a pro forma conviction?
Do you want to address that right now? Yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't remember 20 questions, so yeah.
Absolutely, that's totally fine.
So the question is this a formality or is, sorry. The question is, thank you for the reminder, the question is this merely a formality or is this feedback considered towards the actual permit? Daniel, go ahead and take us through.
So thank you for the question. So, no, public feedback is very important to our process, right? So we encourage you to submit your formal comments and concerns and questions on this permit, right? So that's the formal comment period that we're not taking them verbally right now, but in 2 weeks from today, from 6 to 9, we're in the same room. We will, have a court reporter take those comments. And those comments oftentimes will get modifications to the permit or the statement. So yes, there is not an important component.
The question is, has ADEQ ever denied a permit that technically met the mission standards due to public health, public trust, or community opposition concerns? And if yes, can you give me a specific example of that?
Another great question. I'm not aware of any time ADEQ has denied a permit. There's operations to that, right? So if there are concerns related to ADEQ or me, right, the permit has a law, right? They can address this concern, to make permit modifications, they can withdraw the permit, and not put in a situation where we deny the permit.
Okay, so to clarify, once they put in a permit application, they get to continue to modify their application until they meet the standards. That generally speaking, ADEQ does not just deny applications.
There may be opportunities for them to modify it, but if they cannot pass them out or meet the requirements of the and state law, the permit will not be issued.
Perfect, thank you very much. And then, what are the penalties if the facility exceeds its permitted limits? I assume there are fines, but are operations suspended? Are the fines automatic? But what happens if they break the law?
Another great question. We have a compliance enforcement policy and handbook on our webpage. Encourage you to go over and look at that. Each situation, each violation, each thing is unique. So we have a bunch of potential options that are listed. So I would not speculate on what
On a case-by-case scenario, which makes it,
Yeah, I would not.
it's a case-by-case scenario, which makes it hard to say, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, because it could be a different scenario depending on what happens.
Correct, and that's why I encourage you to look at our compliance enforcement policy and whatnot. They clearly identify what the policy is requiring, and it's pretty complex, and I cannot pull it off the top of my head right now.
But probably pretty robust.
It's very robust, yes.
So I know that ADEQ is applying for an air quality permit, but aluminum dust and hydrogen chloride contaminants are going to build up, so they'll just go away, they don't have the applicant. Does ADEQ have any plans for moderating aluminum dust and other pollutants in the soil or in stormwater runoff due to the air contamination?
My plan right now is really their water line right now, so that's where my focus is right now. I will pass it to my colleague.
So this is a water question.
On stormwater question,
Okay. Why don't you restate it?
If the ground is contaminated because they're spewing 100 tons of particulates into the air every single year, that particulate doesn't go away. It just builds up over time. Is anybody monitoring that?
The question is, are we monitoring particulates and what's happening with those particulates over time? Is this a water or taking those?
Of course. So the cities permit that I talked about earlier, the one that if ADI was going to discharge directly, they would need an individual safety permit. But what you're asking for is outside of that permit, and there would be no trace study, there would be no way to find a responsible party for that. That's outside of
It's not here now.
Yes. So just to clarify that, because you sort of touched on it, because the plant is not a point source, ADEQ doesn't care about other kinds of particulates that might end up in the San Pedro.
I would suggest a change in that language. It has nothing to do about whether or not we care. It has to do with the authority granted to us. Thank you.
What solid wastes, such as aluminum dross, slag, spent backhouse mulches will be separated, and how would they be disposed of? And does ADEQ have any authority over that question?
So the question is about solid waste, okay, and what authority we have over that, right? Okay. Oh, you got my, go ahead.
So I'm not a solid waste person, but still you are responsible to it. The grass that's produced is handled in the San Pedro River facility because we want to establish that it is not hazardous and it is not handled on site. It's shipped away possibly to a different state. That is the process. There is nothing that is done with the grass once it's produced on site.
Okay, I think we have time for one more.
So what does ADEQ do if there is a fire, explosion, chemical release, or some other industrial accident at the facility?
So what does ADEQ do for fire, explosion, or some other chemical accident at the facility? Go ahead, Dan.
Great question. We're not first responders. Those type of responses would be done by the local response group, firefighting. That is not something that is uniform to the first group.
But it's allowed to, because it has an accident, ADEQ does some things that we
I'm not saying that. I am saying that from a burning standpoint, the emergency response, the emergency action is going to be first responders that are going to respond. And then we can come back and figure out exactly what happened and try to ensure that we have but the immediate concern is something that would be something that would be.
But in the meantime, Daniel, the point is for us to have a robust permit that hopefully prevents those kinds of things from happening. Isn't that right? Very good.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for coming here. You're all professionals, and I respect the time you've taken. You're going to be here until 9 o'clock. I'm sure you're all staying here. You came out for things, so I really appreciate your time. My opposition is to the plant, not just to you personally or any of the work you are doing for the state. There's a few votes. Thank you very much.
So now we have Catherine Townsend. So come on up, Catherine. And I'm sorry, on deck we have Kenny Yams, and Kay Daddy, and I'm sorry that I couldn't read that there. And Catherine has a question about, it's another process.
I'm going to use the podium and I'm going to face the audience because I think seeing people's backs is problematic. My question is this: I reviewed the and the documents that are on the website because I was hoping that I could use Google and very old math book to try and replicate the math that ADI provided in order to figure out whether or not the numbers were right. But I couldn't find any of the data that I actually needed in order to do any of the math. So I reached out to ADEQ staff to say, hey, where do those numbers come from so that I can replicate the math? What are the throughputs? What are any of the figures? And I got an email back very quickly that was very common that gave me links to modeling. So my understanding from the email that I received from ADEQ is that the numbers that we're looking at don't actually have anything to do with the plant that is going to exist in Benson. This is all theoretical some sort of imaginary plant that exists on paper, but not what's actually being built. And my question is this. I think that when you look at the numbers, we're really, really close to requiring further review. I think we're really close to meeting the major thresholds for a review. I'm concerned, very concerned, that what we're looking at is synthetic minor permitting, where they give us numbers so that they're below those thresholds, so that they don't have to undergo further evaluation. And so here's my question for you guys. Is there a mechanism that we can invoke that lets us get you to do the further investigation using real numbers from a real facility with the equipment that they intend to use and the manufacturer's guarantees of what the performance of the equipment that they're going to install is, as opposed to some sort of theoretical facility? Can we ask you to do that? And if we can, how do we do that? And if it's not a function of us asking, what would trigger that? Because the things that I think would trigger that are numbers that are from ADI that you're just letting them use.
So the question is there a mechanism that can cause us to go back and look at the numbers that are not as theoretical, or as she's saying? I think she's saying nebulous. That's not what we're saying, but the question remains. So, yeah.
So what I would say is, I understand the reference to a theoretical process you're coming. The modeling is inherently theoretical, right? Because you're using a mathematical simulation to figure out what may happen. Because right now there's no facility for us to have actual data. But with respect to the inputs into the model, the emission rates, those are actually either coming from reliable engineering documents that we are actually verifying and applying in this case, or some of these factors actually come from comparable facilities elsewhere in the country. That is what we have done. And if you have had trouble finding the information that you need, we are more than happy to spend time with you to go through them together. But if you have a follow-up question, I'm happy to take it.
Yeah, there you go.
I didn't use my little 2 minutes. I sat down because I have a broken ankle and it hurts. Okay, so I understand what you just said.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I understand what you just said, and I understand that the models are theoretical because the plant doesn't exist. And perhaps I misunderstood the email I received, and perhaps I misunderstood the links in the email and the data that I looked at in the links. But it looks to me like you're just using analogous as opposed to saying to ADI, what machines are you using? What are your throughputs? What are you planning on doing with this stuff? How far are you going to go? How much are you going to do? All of the questions that we need in order to actually know whether or not the numbers that they're giving us are accurate, as opposed to just, hey, there's this facility over there that's doing this, which isn't necessarily what's going to be happening here. I'm looking for real numbers. And my understanding is that if we trigger the major thresholds, that you guys actually get those real numbers. And so I'm asking you, how do we get you to do that if they aren't giving you the numbers that would trigger it? Is there a way for us as the public to say, can we do more scrutiny? That's my question.
I think the response is we are pretty much doing everything that you're asking for. And if you had time, we are happy to set up, like a video call, and myself, my engineers, we can spend time. I can literally walk you through the calculations and explain to you where the numbers are coming from.
That's not what I asked. I don't know what the words to use. You're talking about theory. I want to talk about this facility. I'm sorry. I think, I don't know if I'm not being clear enough. I'm not asking you to give me theoretical numbers. I'm asking you to look at real numbers. What do I need to do to get you to look at real numbers?
So I think what I hear Balaji saying is that you go into the there are things that here. So maybe we can have Daniel speak to that. And that'll be your
real numbers. So you want to know what that facility, what the plan is, what those real numbers are, right? We don't have real numbers because it's not built. So every plan and methodology is the same. For those facilities, we've got the emissions data, we've got that emission standards, we've got that stuff from other facilities or engineering out into a plan. But those are still theoretical numbers like when there's a plan, or conceptual plan, so. It's not us. And I understand frustration, but that is the process for any brand new facility that goes to permitting in the state of Arizona or across the country. We don't have numbers. We have theoretical numbers based on engineering documents, based on data, based on EPA guidance, and other documents. That is what we use when we have a good number.
So the answer to my question is there's nothing we can do to trigger this. There's nothing.
I think one thing is gone, right? Clearly, there's a disconnect between what you're trying to say and what you're expecting for us to want to do. But the one thing I'd say is, to the extent that an applicant is making representations, we are going through a process to verify and validate those values. But that is not the end of the story, because those concepts, those emission concepts, are put into the permit limits. As you skim through the permit, you will see a lot of different emission limits. So whatever representation that they are making, in your words, from analogous facilities elsewhere in the country, we are not just accepting them at face value and moving on. We are codifying them in the permit, and they're going to be on a very structured testing frequency to show ongoing compliance. I hope that that's it.
Okay. Let's go to Kenny, who's been waiting for a little bit. So Kenny has a question about environmental impact.
I just want to say, it looks good on paper, don't it? This plant being built, you said it's theoretical. I mean, why don't you guys get somebody that's qualified to understand what's going on, like you were saying from Mexico and all that? Get somebody like the Army Corps of Engineers to come and take a look at it. That'd be a good resource. I mean, don't take it at face value, because once the plant is built, you guys are going to basically say, sorry for your luck. And then we're stuck with a bad plan. Another thing I want to say, okay, you claim that you put out all these fillers out there in less than 58 hours. Just out of curiosity, I want to see a show of hands that knew about this stuff 4 months ago, out of this 250 people. Wow, we got a whole what, 10? So you're not being honest about it. You're not putting, you got people that are over 70 that don't have access to the newspaper subscription. They don't have access to the internet. Okay? You were totally unfair. You had 250 people here, which is a good cross-section of this town. Okay? So you claim that you were all told by mailings and all that. That's a bunch of bull.
I tell you this, right? So I did not say that he told the law. I told you that he attempted to say the law. Right?
Let me just speak to this for just a moment. I understand that may be true, but Balaji is, I can tell you, a consummate professional. So let's not take shots at him. I'd rather we not do that. Let's not finish it. What you're saying is hard to understand. Okay, so let me just take some responsibility for this community maybe not knowing what was going on. I will tell you that we did send out mailers, okay? Now, we didn't know that that was the case, that you were, let me finish talking. Okay, do you want the answer? Do you want the answer? Okay, so we did the best we could. We made the effort, just as Balaji said. We are not perfect. And you have to be patient with the fact that we can't just automatically, ESP say, hey, there's a meeting. We are doing the best we can. This is a new initiative that started at ADEQ probably a couple of years ago, and we're doing all that we can. So please don't take shots at our process. We're doing the best that we can, and we will continue to try and improve. And we did learn from that. We now know that when there's a bill that goes out, people don't get that if they said, hey, I want it digitally. So we're making sure that we do a better job of that, right? So I just wanted question, because I'm part of that debate.
I understand that. Because people, what he said, he said all these people supposedly do.
Mike.
So this plan's gonna be built, it's gonna go by parameters.
Mike.
My question is, why don't you be honest with people?
Okay, well, you may not believe that, but we're doing the best we
I
can.
don't think a lot of
To be
people.
honest. All right, and that's, we have come and we're here to teach.
I just wanted to ask you, my name is Melissa Hayes, I'm actually the community engagement planner, so I actually appreciate your input about not receiving this. If there are ways that you think would be better for us to reach out to you in a case like this, please let us know. I'm sorry, we would really like to know and improve our process. So apologies to those who did not receive it, but please do let us know. Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa, for that. Much appreciated. And we will continue to try to improve, because we want to interact with communities throughout Arizona and do the best that we can to connect with you and understand what your concerns are. All right, it looks like the next person to go is Kate ADEQ. Kate? Oh. Okay, that's fine. Dan, why don't we give you a couple of minutes?
See if we can get this even more heated. I shouldn't do it. This is far too serious. This is far too serious. Well, here's a question I have. I don't even know who to address this to. I guess I'll follow the pattern. Do you guys take into consideration companies like ADEQ who have a history of environmental and toxic violations? Is that part of your litmus test as far as granting permits go?
So the question is, do we consider, as I understand it, Dan, bad actors, basically, that they exist and that they're out there? Do we even consider them? Well, he said ADI, but he said bad actors generally also, so. Go ahead, Tim.
Great question, so I appreciate the question. The answer is that we are looking at the permit application that comes in. That is where our authority is. We need to work with that permit application, the permit D, that brings that application in, and evaluate it on the merits of that permit. So, short answer is, no, I can't consider the compliance history of the facility or a company that's mixed there. I've got to look at that actual permit.
Well, that would dovetail with another question that, well, it was actually when you came up to explain, I'm sorry, I forgot how to pronounce your name. But when you came up and explained, so you said you did acknowledge, and I appreciate it, that ADI provided you the data, the measurements. But are you guys aware that their parent company, Still Dynamics, since 2021 have had 11 incident violations, 11 incidents in 4 years? That's excessive, in my opinion. And anyway, I just wanted you guys, I want to find out what your thoughts were about that. Do you consider that in the long run? Do you want to give, it's like giving the keys to the criminal, or the keys to jail to the criminal. I don't think that's a good thing. My next question, and thank you very much for relinquishing, I appreciate that. My next question is, we did confirm about the Tucson and Craycroft. I'm going to phone a friend. What was that? What was the measurement for the Tucson and Craycroft? Is that acceptable to measure nitrogen dioxide to a test for Benson at Craycroft the 22nd in Tucson?
Question you're asking is about the background concentration of that meter. Let me go back a little to the slide and maybe we can try to.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Sorry. such as 22nd and Craycroft Monitor in Tucson.
Gotcha, okay. So, now I follow. So when we talked about the modeling exercise, we talked about modeling the actual project, but also talked about the background. So the background is what you're referring to. We don't have background monitors every single portion of the state. So it's a very common methodology in modeling that's done across different agencies, whereby if you don't have a localized monitor, you're trying to find the best alternative. And in this instance, we use data from Tucson, working with the company. And the reason why Tucson was acceptable for us is it represents a value that is conservative. Because we talk about the Tucson area more in terms of traffic and so on, where your backgrounds are likely to be more elevated than maybe an area like this. So that was the reason why the number was used. So when we talk about marketing, the marketing is unique to Benson, it's unique to ADEQ. But the background concentrations, you are looking for a nominal value to represent the air share. So that's where we came up with Tucson. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, I'm not being a smart aleck. It makes no sense to me if you're going to build it.
No, I haven't started yet. I promise I won't. You're very nice, you're pretty. So I think what they're asking is, and I think you understand this, but maybe we're not getting the answer. The question is, why is modeling in Tucson applied here in Benson? Is how it seems to the crowd.
Okay, that's the question. We are not.
Is that accurate? Yes. Okay.
We are not modeling in Tucson. We are modeling in Benson. But that's correct. But that's just a number. You see what I'm saying? You're not modeling in Tucson because it's graduate.
So maybe the deeper question is, why is that number from Tucson even being applied in Benson, which is a totally different thing? I'm just trying to help get the question answered.
Okay. So I put up the slide.
I think he said that they do. So modeling is Benson. I'm sorry, apology.
Yeah, two different things, right? So when you say why don't we test here, there is no monitor here right now that gives you a nitrogen oxide value for this area before the plant comes in.
Why do they compare it to the industrial part of Tucson?
Because that gives you a higher value and that works against the company in a model. If that makes sense. So when you talk about modeling, you model ADEQ emissions, then you add a background. If any one of these numbers are higher than what they need to be, you are taking a very conservative valuation. So in this case, if they were trying to use something for a very, very remote portion of the state, exceptionally low values as background, that would be them trying to gain the process. They didn't do that. In this instance, they actually took a value from Tucson, which we believe is more inflated than what you may see out here. And that is a good thing because that makes the model more conservative. To answer your question, we didn't model Tucson. We only modeled in Benson at this location. But you have to make sure that you're reasonably taking into account what is previously existed. And for that, since we are lacking localized data, we use the more conservative data points from the Tucson area. So when you see these results for air-cooled power, it is quite possible if you had a localized monitor in Benson, you had a localized background, that number for the total concentration is likely to be more than the number of inches. Does that make sense?
All right, my last one, I'm not sure who to direct this to, but why is it acceptable for this permit that ADI does not have to submit to ADEQ regularly so the public has access to the findings? And you mentioned it, or you were, Tim, I think, when you mentioned that about the reporting process, but according to the permit, there is no requirement that they have to report to you on a regular basis. It's self-reporting. And this is from a company whose vice president told the public last November what's going to come out of our stacks is warm, clean air. If it was clean air, we wouldn't be standing here right now, would we? So, I should trust that they're going to report the right thing. Because they are not us. They are not local citizens here. They've come in to take a job. You know, that's all they're here to make money. So how can we trust them? I'm sorry, I won't pontificate any further.
Thank you, Dan. The question I heard there was, basically, how can we trust that you're going to monitor and be looking at what they're doing on a consistent basis? Did you want to answer that, Balaji, or did you want to take it?
So, I agree with you from the standpoint that we just can't accept anything that the company gives us, including the dynamics, the face value, and move on and give them a permit. So, the permit is only one half of the process. Right? You know, our compliance system has to work really well. And Tim talked about a bunch of different opportunities, whether it's us out there doing unannounced inspections, you guys phoning the complaint and us showing up and inspecting, a lot of reporting. So you said something about that they are not submitting reports to us, and if you spend some time with us at the end of the meeting, we can show you in the permit that the permit requires significant amount of reporting. And we don't just accept the reports at face value, we review every one of them. Right. Absolutely. I'm happy to spend time with you there.
Yeah, and I think that was made clear earlier that Balaji is willing to speak to people aside from this meeting, and I think that's something that you should avail yourselves of. Okay, so next three people on dock, or on deck, sorry. Michelle Kenyon, she just has some general questions, it sounds like. Susan Adams, who has some water use questions, and Nicole who has a water ecology question or questions. So, Michelle? Oh, come on, Michelle.
My name is Michelle Kenyon, and I live 2 blocks from here. The proposed plant will be San Pedro mile from my house. What measures will be required to stop the water being thrust to the San Pedro River, particularly from groundwater pumping and development? This 174,000 square foot plant is proposed to be on 200 acres along and only 175 yards away from the protected San Pedro River. The city of Benson relies on the water from wells that drop from the aquifer in the San Pedro River floodplain. Interestingly enough, the plant itself is proposed to be in a flood zone area. And line number 20 of the office building plan specifically says this design is not intended for use in flood hazard areas. The gray water, which is somehow being diverted to the golf course, needs to go somewhere when it gets there. After it makes the greens look nice and pretty, it absorbs it to the ground and makes its way back into the river, which negates the environmental purpose of diverting it in the first place. ADEQ is responsible for the protection and enhancing public health and the environment by preventing and cleaning up pollution. Wouldn't it be easier to just prevent it? Being proactive is much better than being reactive. It's not only for Benson residents and winter visitors, but all of our neighbors within a 20-mile radius and everyone up the San Pedro River will be affected by the pollutants originating from ADI. Not only controlled pollutants, but also the ones that sneak by controlled measures. Benson residents will be affected by air pollution, 30 tons of hazardous aluminum particles annually. We're in a valley. All the pollutants will be trapped in a bowl or and hang there. It might not affect us now, but in the years to come, aluminum in the air cause lung disease, Alzheimer's, cancers, and will be apparent in the years to come. Water pollution. I already talked about that. Noise pollution. Increased road and rail traffic along with the equipment from the plant running non-stop 24/7 and 365 days a year. The light pollution. The plant will be lit up like a maximum security prison. Is once every 5 years or annually for inspections at ADI's plant, groundwater inspections, air quality inspections, and noise decibel monitors enough. Please do not approve the level 5 permit, and how can you give a permit without numbers?
Thanks for the question. So I've jotted down a couple here. The first question that popped up is the groundwater pumping conversation at the dewater basin, right? At ADEQ, we have the ability to rate the quality of the groundwater, but the quantity is outside of our scope. However, in preparation for this meeting, we did talk with the Arizona ADEQ, Department of Water Resources, about this basin, and it's my understanding that conversation is not in an active management area. They do not have any regulations as far as groundwater quantity. But they would be the agency that would regulate it for regulation. Gray water. So the gray water, if the health water is going into the sewer system, going to the wastewater treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant, and then the water. Of course, that has to meet all the standards that are in that first for the city of Benson. If they end up diverting and using gray water for water in the golf course, that water will also have to meet standards. The Aquifer Protection Program ensures that there are not discharges to the surface of the land that cause or contribute to the exceedance or Aquifer water quality standard in the groundwater. So here in Arizona, our statutes consider all groundwater to be drinking water. So what we've done is we've implemented Aquifer water quality standards, which are essentially the federal maximum contaminant levels for the Safe Drinking Water Act, and we apply that to our water so we can protect our water and the drinking water because here in Arizona it very much is. So that's the answer on the gray water component. And then there was another kind of.
So it tells you that they're even able to build near the San Pedro, it's protected. What's the deal?
Yeah, I understand. Unfortunately, zoning, flood control, all that sort of stuff is outside of the scope of my position here at ADEQ, right? I'm really all about the drinking water and the groundwater, so all that sort of stuff I can't really speak to. So I like knowledge on it. You also had a component in there that was related to the air quality permit. I did not capture. Did you guys capture it?
So what I got thinking, we have a question on the line of construction. So one thing I want to remind people, the permit is very effective. The number of stack testings is significantly above state and federal minimum requirements. We're having annual state stack testing versus what is usually once in 5 permit terms. We're also doing quarterly testing for some pollutants for the permit term, unless they have 8 consecutive quarters of 50% or below the standard. And as far as compliance and concerns about compliance and inspections, we do unannounced inspections for the air quality department. And if there's a complaint from the community, please call us, contact us with an online portal to log the complaint, and we respond to all complaints that we receive. So this facility will be inspected based on unannounced inspections, based on the self-reporting monitoring to us, based on the staff testing, based on all the reporting, and any complaints that we receive from the community will also be investigated.
Thank you, Bill. All right, Susan, come on. Susan had some questions about the water. What do you say?
Okay, there. Okay. My understanding is this is taking a huge quantity of water per hour through the plant. And then it's putting it into Benson's sewer system. What happens when that sewer system is totally overwhelmed by the massive amount of water that's going to daily that would normally go through a year? Is that when you guys step in?
Great question. So the question really is about capacity of wastewater treatment plant and the planning that goes along with that. Here in Benson, you all are lucky in that the plant, I believe, is rated for 1.2 million gallons a day. So it can handle 1.2 million gallons a day, and currently it's handling 300,000. So you have a lot of extra capacity in that wastewater treatment plant to handle additional growth in the community. Additionally, the
Of course, they need to meet their standards regardless, we need to plan for it. They need to make sure that they're in full compliance with that permit and that this water is being properly treated.
Being put on the policy and put into the legislature.
Yeah, absolutely. Arizona was actually one of the first states in the nation to reuse wastewater in these ways. We started in the 40s up the Grand Canyon. So reusing effluent from wastewater treatment plants in golf courses, golf course lakes, reinjection into aquifers, preventing, right? All that stuff is super common and actually is really important. In this instance, it is helpful to mitigate some of the water drought as you're concerned with San Pedro, right? So this water isn't being evaporated, but it's being returned back into the cycle, as I understand the process.
My concern also is that is our sewer facility capable of removing heavy metals?
Absolutely. So your all wastewater treatment plants in Arizona, like I said, have to meet those aquifer water quality standards at their discharge so that they do not impact the aquifer. Or if they're discharging the surface water, they need to meet these permit requirements. So heavy metals, absolutely.
And you do realize that the San Pedro only flows about 20% of the time.
I wasn't aware of the specific number, but yeah, I've been down there. It's gorgeous, and yeah, I understand it's not running all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole? Nicole, come on up. And Nicole has questions about water and ecology. Okay, that's okay, not a problem. Go ahead and shoot, whatever it is.
So first, just kind of for reference on that last question, with in reference to how much water we're processing like right now, is that with our summer population or our winter population? Because there's a significant difference there.
Yep.
Let me phone for real quick. David, is that an average of 300,000 gallons per day? Like that's an annual average or monthly annual average?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because as we all know, it changed a lot. So my first question is actually, can we go to the slide with the long-term exposure numbers real quick? So looking at the numbers shown on that slide, I'm wondering how you managed to get right there, like right about where the nursing home is, down at the same exact number as all the way at the school, versus the other one that's really close being so low. They're like so much higher. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah, all of these are very technical because the explanation for why the two numbers are pretty similar, even the distance are so different. So the prevailing winds are from the south to north. So the school actually is like the prevailing winds and from the
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry. So you look at the prevailing winds actually from the south to the north. Okay. So if you look at this number 0.004 and probably close to facility, but it is not on the downwind direction. But school, yes. So school is it's a large distance, but it's on the downwind condition, downwind location. So that's why the number is pretty close.
I think I get what you're saying. So the wind, it's just all the wind direction.
Yeah, this way, yeah.
Okay.
So the basic answer is that's being monitored downwind, basically. Is that right? The wind moves in that direction, so that's why you see those numbers. Is that accurate? Okay, excellent.
Okay, so, next thing is with, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, that area is in a floodplain. So, I guess it's for you guys. So, is there required to be any remediation plans for if anything is, like if it floods and there's, for lack of a better word, stuff gets into that, or basically what's the plan for that?
I understand. Yeah, so, for the aquifer protection program permit, because they don't require, there's nothing that requires them to have a response plan to, in response to flooding. However, if they did have flooding and they discharge, materials that have the probability of possibly contributing to an exceedance of those ADEQ drinking water standards applied to our groundwater, then they would need to, of course, remediate those and prevent that, damage to the aquifer.
And then one last thing, not trying to make it political, so please don't take me there. With changes that have been happening within the EPA and their structure management, whoever's running that, could that potentially affect the review process that this will be going through? Because I know you said it has to go through the EPA as well.
Yeah, the question is, will changes in the EPA change things as far as how we monitor and permit? Go ahead, Dave.
Interesting question, thank you. I can't speculate on what's going to happen to EPA, right? I just know EPA's got statutory authority to do a review within 45 days. And I expect EPA to follow federal law and the statutory requirements to do that review.
Okay. Thank you so much for the question. Cool. Great job. Okay, next we have Kimberly Spoken, who is speaking about safety, water, ecology, etc. And then William Shepard, water and AQMD. And then Frank Chavez, environmental concerns. So, Kimberly, here you go.
My name is Kimberly Smogan. I live just opposite of the plant. I live so close to it that they put up a fence, brand new fence wall. Okay, I live on the same exact floodplain. So I have quite a few questions. When you're modeling, do you guys know about the cyclonic winds that come 2 seasons a year that go from the southwest portion of the property from across the river and cut through my property? Sometimes as narrow as this easel, sometimes as wide as my house, that will be picking up those particles and just blowing through my property and all over everything. Are you guys even aware of this? Because those are very unique to our areas.
Next question.
Yes.
Are we aware of the air permit cyclone?
We call them dust devils. Everybody has dust devils, right?
Yeah, so we consult with ADEQ meteorologist. So look at the Benson area. The meteorologist tells us there are 2 components of waves. One is the drainage flow from the south to north along the valley orientation. This is one component. The other component, maybe you said, is a regional scale winds from the west to east. So these 2 components.
Southwest to northeast.
Yeah, so these components, 2 components of waves. So the data, the meteor data modeling used has captured these 2 components, drainage flow and the regional scale flow. So
Okay, well, when you're talking about how these highest ratings are only at the fence line, first of all, that's my fence line. So it doesn't belong in a residential area. I'm taking
The answer Okay, just to be clear, the answer I heard was that they are aware of the winds that come through there and that they've projected for what's going to be happening. Is that accurate? Okay, go ahead.
I also share that floodplain. Whenever it rains, the water runs into into the river and heads up north. So these contaminants that you're only worried about being in the air that fall on the ground are then going to rush into the San Pedro River. And they're going to rush into the San Pedro River even more than they did before because they've already cleared that entire riparian area. My family's already been down there and the foundation has already been laid. So that increases the flood risks. And that's probably why it said right on their paperwork that this doesn't belong in a floodplain, would be my assumption. So airborne particles fall on the ground. You also said that you looked at 1 hour effects, you looked at 1 year effects. I think more of us are concerned with 10 year or 20 year. I think we're concerned about our children and we're concerned about our grandchildren. I have a 100-foot well. How long will it take for these forever chemicals with the seasonal rains to sink down and for me to have these chemicals in my drinking water and the drinking water of my children? Do you have those numbers? Do you have the numbers of them accumulating in the systems of our children in 5, 10, and 20 years? Because those are the numbers I'm concerned about.
For 10, 20, 30 years down the line. That sounded like water to me, but maybe it's air.
It's also air.
Right, so who wants to take it? Who wants to take it? Bobby? I have 2 minds. How did that happen?
Thank you for your question. I understand your concerns. Not going to like the answer. We can take this down and keep updating each other. That's a consideration. It's something that's outside of my authority and, what we're looking at, that's from your cover. But we can write these questions down and reach out to you to see if there's any information. But I don't have that information.
Okay, there's been a lot of talk also about the fact that this is in a valley. Have these studies that you guys, and these modeling plans that you guys are basing the residue and the effects on, are you basing it on a valley? Because in valleys, things sit a lot longer. They don't have a way to escape. We have the same thing with the riverbed.
So that's a good question. When we do modeling, we are taking local estimations into account. And you talked about the wind, you talked about all the prevailing winds and the regional scale evidence. Similarly, the hospital takes into account. It's a very, very key input. What kind of training evidence is planned, complex, on the activity, all of that is a consideration. So because that has a direct effect on how the pollution moves. So what we're talking about is how the land is here, we have to think about it.
But doesn't that mean that we would have a huge amount of variability in the emission, or how they would test in just one spot on my property? I've got a river on my property. It's over 15 feet deep.
Yeah, to be clear, we run a model. We're not running for a specific spot. The model follows what's called a clear pattern. We run it for 7 months. So if you take the testing from the project, this happening, the emissions are ready. You spread it, span out, and then you're looking to a computer model. Very small spaces, how the impact change from one location to another. So the very concept of, hey, you could have extremely complex terrain, and I don't know what exact impacts are actually occurring. That question is answered because the model is so pinpoint in how narrow the range is. You're not saying one sector here and another sector from another way. They are much more close to the space. So we have to take a think about how the concentrations are changing based on where you are on the ground.
Okay, so how do concentrations change on the ground when this particulate matter falls down and then it rains? We have a monsoon and it floods up north through the river. And then how does it affect the beef? We've got a lot of ranchers and cows here, and they feed our nation. And this is free range land. So these animals are grazing. They're going to be rained on by it. They're going to be walking in it, breathing it in, eating it, and drinking directly out of the San Pedro River. By the time they reach market age, they're 2 to 5 years old. How much residue is going to be in the beef by the time they're marketed, butchered, and distributed all over this country?
It is certainly a valid question from a big picture standpoint. And I don't want to sound dismissive, but we kind of go back to the principles of what we are about the permitting process. We control what is being emitted in the air. And I'm not trying to keep it focusing narrow here, but I'm genuinely saying the permit is all about air emissions.
But it does affect the ground.
I'm not denying that.
So who's in charge of that? Is it anyone? Because no one protected the riparian area. So all this protected stuff and all these regulations that aren't being regulated.
So we're at 3 minutes, and so I'm going to let Balaji answer this question, then we're going to move on to the next speaker. But thank you for the question.
Thank you.
So certainly from an air quality standpoint, you explained what we've done, what the permit is like. And I think, Randy and Josie talked about what happens, with respect to stuff that's going into the certain what was offered. But with respect to your question about what happens in terms of soil contamination and things like that, I'm just going to explain, that is just not central to what we do. The air quality program has got a very narrow niche, and we got to apply our principles and so that with respect to air. So I'm just not able to answer your question directly, because it's out of our niche.
But if you're supposed to be the American Department of Environmental Quality, do you care?
So, again, let's not make this about caring or not caring. We're talking about what's in the permit, and this is the permit that's been applied for. That is a valid question. Let me write it down, and we'll look into it for you. Because there is a component at ADEQ that deals with soil. And we've had conversations about the fact that, yes, this is air, this is water. There's also waste or soil, right? You don't distinguish between that. You just want your community to be safe. So we understand the question, and I'll write that down. Why don't we go on to Will Shepherd? Is Will here? I think that's the next person. Cam, then Will. Okay. Looks like we may not have William here. Maybe he had to go. Let's go to Frank Chavez then. And Frank's speaking about environmental concerns.
Thank you. I'm not really a speaker, but the questions are very important. I am concerned this town was built way over here. Our water lines. The water lines. Okay, the water lines, how many gallons per minute, the pressure is going to be regulated for that power plant to operate correctly. That's what my concern is, because anybody around there, you're going to have to put regulators for your house, because your faucets are going to bust. Your water lines are going to bust. I want to know what is the water per minute that the city of Benson requires for it to keep the operation of this facility up and running. The water, we're talking about water, okay? You gotta have water, they said they had no water. So in order to have water, there has to be so many cubic feet of water going through that pipeline for them. Now, I don't know how old this pipeline is, but when you're putting a lot of pressure on pipeline that's been 30, 40, 50 years old, it might not handle the pressure that is needed, because you're gonna have to pump up those pumps.
Frank, thank you for that question. I'm going to try and restate it and stop your time here, because I was writing at the same time you were asking it. So I think the question again has to do with capacity and whether the city's sewers / pipelines. Okay, it sounds like Randy understands the question, and I didn't quite.
Yeah, all right, so the question is, this facility is going to need a lot of water. Concerns about that water pressure in the drinking water systems and having impacts on homeowners, faucets and whatnot.
The first is, how much pressure is this factory going to require to maintain an adequate balance to produce for the chemicals for this aluminum?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Ensuring that the water system can deliver what has been promised is really a city concern. I will say, however, that generally when you're dealing with facilities and they need a lot of water, you solve that by increasing the diameter of the pipe, not by jacking the pressure way up, right? So generally it's a diameter problem, not a pressure problem, right? But yeah, absolutely. But really great question for the city. I don't have an answer, but definitely something that would have to be addressed, to make sure they get the water that they're contracting to get.
The other thing, I guess, it must be pertaining to you. I am an old air conditioning repairman, so I deal with sensors, with all this new stuff. My concern is, if the water is not there, will the sensor, because of the water pressure, didn't do what it was supposed to do so that everything works properly? What sensor prevents it from this thing automatically locking down itself without having an individual to turn that switch off? Because let's say one of the sensors fails, okay? And this has to pertain to you guys. It fails to stack all these pollutants that's not supposed to be going through that chimney. What if they're going to prevent it that it automatically says, hey, there's something wrong? The air quality, the air that's coming out of the roof, out of the stack, is not proper and it's in the danger zone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Frank. Okay, great. So the question I'm hearing there is, what assurances do we have that the monitors are going to be working and that they're not going to be, were you saying overloaded or not working altogether? So the question is, what assurances do we have that the sensors are going to work? I think is what he's saying.
Yeah, I got you. So when you talk about sensors and everything, are you talking about controlling equipment failure? Would that be correct? Okay. So the permit is very prescriptive. The control system goes down, the facility has to come down. So meaning there's no ability for the company to take the controls down or even if it's non-functioning, keep on going, pumping out uncontrolled emissions. That would be a serious infraction of the permit, and that would be something if they did, they would go after them in some kind of enforcement kind of thing. Right? So that's a very important principle because all the representations in the permit are based upon them using a certain level of control. And those controls need to be achieved. Right? So we have checks and balances in place in the permit through different kinds of plans, whereby they keep up on them and make sure they're in working order. And should they for some reason go down, they got to keep the plans down to repair the equipment before they come back up.
Thank you for that question, Frank. Okay, it looks like the next three people we have on deck here are Hope Chavez, Mike Morse, and Ron Brooks. So Hope, come on up, Hope. Thank you.
Okay, so the company is the one that's going to let we know if this now went down, whether the controls stopped and the pollutants are going up the stacks. Well, who is going to stop that? Does it automatically stop?
The plant doesn't automatically go down, but there are conditions in the permit that would legally stipulate that the plant has to go down. So when the control system is saying, I'm taking an example, we are talking about this hydrogen chloride injection system, that is where you add some live injection systems to control hydrogen chloride. When that system is failing, there is The prospect of an uncontrolled release of hydrogen chloride, that is entirely not permissible. If the system go down and the facility still operating, that would be a significant violation. So when all inspectors go to the property periodically and check, what they do is they walk around, they are obviously physical observations, but they do through records. And a lot of records are electronic. So when they are auditing the system that their line lifting system went down at a certain time, and if there is evidence that the process is still operating beyond the time frame, that would be a violation of the code.
Okay, so is somebody always monitoring that?
Somebody has plans is always monitoring that. And the permit would legally stipulate that they need to submit a report to us within a timely fashion. And then we do investigation. So,
And what is the timely fashion?
so when you have what's called an excess emission event under state law, there's a requirement to report within 24 hours by either telephone or by email or by fax. And then they are required on top of it to submit a more detailed report in 3 days. Essentially, that explains, hey, what is the root cause of why this all happened? And what kind of countermeasures we put in place to remedy the problem? And the fact that we are now back up and around. And again, we don't make information based so we do more investigation to ensure that this has actually happened. We may keep the plans down in a timely fashion when some unplanned environmental incident happens. So we check.
Okay. Another question, shouldn't the company have its own hazmat unit available to them?
That's outside my control.
Can you restate the question? Should they have their own hazmat facility? People that are on site? Okay.
So what I do know that is they have what is called an emergency evacuation plan for worker safety if something bad happens. And I believe they have 5 plans with the city of Benson. I don't know if that is of it. But to be clear, that component with respect to what happens in an emergency or who they need to have trained in the facility, that is not something that ADEQ, the air quality project, we just don't have a lot. So that is something that's come up by the company. We're working in close coordination with the Benson Fire Department, and that process happens separately in that sense, not too much.
Thank you. One thing that I don't think has been brought up is the hazards to the workers in this plant. You know one, and there are quite a few. Besides a lot of accidents happening from hands to arms, because of the machinery that they are working with, heavy equipment and stuff like that. Then we have a lot of high blood pressure problems, we have high glucose problems, increased hypertension in these workers, elevated hemoglobins, and this is throughout different plants that bring this on. In particular, they have a lot of prostate cancer, lung and stomach cancer, asthma, COPD, a lot of things. So as we think about this, let's think about the people that are going to be working here too.
That we want to look into with DHS. I don't think it's under the purview of the. Oh, that is a motion requirement. I apologize. Okay. Thank you, guys. All right. Hope, and then Mike. Mike, are you here? Mike Morris. Oh, it has. Okay. Yeah, we'll just move on, and we'll give it to the next person. So we have Ron Brooks is next. Come on up, Ron. Now, why don't we just get the next 3 people ready? Herb Conley about water and waste, Mary Mendoza about just information generally, and Kristen Vigan about permits specific to water. Go ahead, Ron.
Okay, thank you for giving me a chance to speak here tonight. My name is Ron Brooks. I've lived at Benson for 27 years. I'm pro business, pro jobs. I really like the idea that the plant can hire a lot of people, good paying jobs. not to have him come here tonight, but that's okay. The problem is is there's even a chance that could contaminate our aquifer. I say no. I say really. Now, the assets we hear about it all the time. And, back east, contamination, something goes wrong, a truck goes through the building, it spills, it flows down the river. Now we're looking at like a 50-year cleanup in our river. We can't afford that. It's like one block from our main pristine waterway through here. All of us drink this water. I have a problem with what do they do containment of these possible accidents. I understand there's going to be some fuel tanks on that property. I don't know what they were used for, but did they have a containment system for that? The other lady brought a good condition. Do they have a hazmat people? Are they prepared to handle that kind of a situation? Because if we did have an accident there, we're talking, a day or two before they show up down here to contain it. It's already too late. It's already destroyed this. And we know about this. This has been happened. I don't know if I'll bring up the Kevin thing, but the groundwater contaminated people had all kinds of cancer. They've denied it for years. I also have a big problem with self-monitoring. Their record back in self-monitoring. Okay, this is a company we're talking about back in Mississippi that has one of the other gentlemen brought up 15 or something violations they've done. 93. Okay, see. Now, I have a problem with that. We need the state to monitor that, or the state to monitor that, or there's some organizations that said they want to do this voluntarily, but this shouldn't have to be voluntary. This should be done by somebody that's state qualified to do this. I don't trust this company, so I just want to make that point.
So thank you, Ron. General comments that you had, or did you have a specific question? Because I don't want to miss it if you did have.
Well, I just wanted to know what kind of containment system they have from the plant downhill to the river. Okay, that's how they plan to contain all that. Because we know the rainwater will be washing the parking lot, all the area around, it's all going to run right down to the river. So, thank you.
So that's containment on the water side, is what I hear you say. Yeah, if we don't have, there's not a permit for water, but are there comments that we can talk about containment systems? Josie?
So if the information that we get from the company shows that they would need a general permit for stormwater, there would be best management practices that would be required, like birds, stuff like that, that would prevent that direct discharge. Now, if it occurs that there will be a direct discharge, again, that's a whole different individual permit that is a year or two process rather than a general permit that you can just quickly get online. The individual permit has a host of pre-application meetings and studies that would be required. But again, that general stormwater permit, that if they would trigger that, would have those best management practices, and that would trigger inspections from the surface water protection team. Again, it would be the crux of that permit is best management practices for stormwater runoff. But at this time, I can't definitively say if that permit will be triggered.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie. All right, Herb, comment?
Because the president is taking out a lot of this stuff. Okay.
Here you go, sir.
Thank you. Nice to see you all here tonight. Although a lot of you disappeared. Thank you, ADEQ staff, for being here. I have questions. Can you tell me what comes out of that stack? Anyone?
Nobody would say nothing.
Oh, you didn't know that? There's a stack down the road, St. David? Oh, you never what comes out of there? There were kinds of pollution. What kinds? How much? Many questions, few answers. Okay. How can you write a permit with parameters, not knowing what comes out of their stack? We can see what comes out of that sack sometimes. It's in the air, it floats out over the valley. Now, this is going to mix in with it. You are probably sensing that a lot of people here have some serious frustrations. And there's some anger. There's reason for that. This is not the appropriate location for your recycling. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, just one more thing. No way in hell.
All right, Mary Mendoza. Mary? She's not, okay. Kristen Whiting? Come on up, Kristen. You had comments to
So I've heard from a few others. I think overall a large concern is there's so many aspects in this permit that fully set up Aluminum Dynamics to function as a self-reporting entity, which, given their history in the other states that we don't acknowledge, but the general public can, it's very concerning. So that's what I'm setting the stage with is let me touch more specifically on these lapses in self-reporting, and I'm hoping that we can request changes to the permit, as federal statutes require Title V permits contain clear, specific, and measurable limitations. These same federal statutes say that this permit should be practically enforceable by the public. So when you're telling us that we should be grateful that you use Tucson modeling air data, but at the same time you're telling us that we can't have specifics on the equipment, I'm not impressed by this, and this isn't okay. We want specifics on the equipment. And we don't want annual performance testing and a generalized logbook. We want detailed defined parameters. And so, I don't know if I'll put it in formal writing for this request, but we want the specific equipment that will be used. They have the plant in Mexico already. There's no reason they can't be providing this, and we can't have real numbers, just like Catherine asked you earlier. We want that. Another aspect that I wanted to ask you about, I know in your PowerPoint, you brought up the ambient air monitor. Does this monitor fall under the method 9 limitations for monitoring? Yes.
It does not have a test method per se, because there are two different things. There is something called stack testing, where you are measuring the solution at the stack, the building. And those are required as a quality testing. You can find test method number for you, one from staff can do for you. But the thing that I'm talking about is the community-based monitoring. That is a different technology altogether. It's a network of receptors that are placed around the communities that we want to measure. Because we don't want about, hey, this is all about hypothetical data, other companies' data. The thing is, the proof is the pudding, really. So the way we get at that is two ways. One, whatever representation the company is making, there are limits in the product. They can't meet those limits, like by stack testing. The stack testing is not just done by the company. They can't bring a third-party vendor who will follow an EPA protocol to do the test. And we review the reports, and we have engineers who actually audit the facility of the test system. So I just want to explain that aspect of our enforcement process. And the other thing is, with respect to monitoring, there is again one more area where we are not just content because of the model, and we feel that the modeling is showing these guys to be protected. We take it one step further, and like Tim talked about, this monitoring requirement is nowhere to be found in state law or federal law. But we felt if we have an obligation to you as a community, right? We want to make sure that we are not doing the same thing, making you buy our law. We actually want to have action in that.
Okay, so right here for the hydrogen chloride monitor, is this 24/7 running a day?
Exactly, 24/7. Yes.
And so that falls under continuous emission monitoring?
No, continuous emission
No.
monitoring system or what you apply in the stack. Okay, so two different things. When you are measuring emissions, you are measuring on a mass rate basis, like a gram per second or a pound per hour. That is what is measured through a continuous emissions monitoring system. What I'm talking about here is actually monitors, ambient monitors that measure concentrations. If you recall, the people
Are there going to be continuous emission monitoring?
that is, they are going to become continuous concentration monitors.
Continuous concentration? Okay.
So, what they are going to do is, ensure like these impacts. These impacts are what we model, but we are not stopping there. We are actually going to have these concentration monitors spread within the community, in sensitive locations.
Where are those locations? Where is this information you're referring to? Is it in the permit right now?
It is not a permit, but the permit provides you a framework on what.
We don't want a framework, we want the actual plan and how this is going to be monitored.
But the plan is what the requirement of the permit, because the company has to submit a very rigorous, what is called a quality assurance project plan. So it's an elaborate document that's put together following EPA methodologies. And we get to review it and we get to say, hey, the locations that you guys are picking are not where you want these monitors to be at. And we will dictate where the monitors will be. So.
And this is all after our public comment period. That's great. Okay. Thank you. They'll come back and show us where those will be, or that's all after the fact?
It's a public document. We are happy to make it available. So we already have a page up and running for dynamics. If this facility permitted to start to build and operate it, our intention is because of the high level of interest from this community, every report that we compile, we do an inspection, whether we get a monitoring report from the company or we get what's called a compliance certificate.
Yeah, you're referring to the too late period, where you're already giving them a permit, where there's no specifics on equipment, there's no specifics on air monitoring, and then you're gonna come back and it's gonna be too late, because the permit is already issued. Anyways, I don't need to spend more time on this, because I have other questions that I need to get to. Okay. So I think back to water, for Randy Waterman, just to clear up, it wasn't just aluminum dynamics that has said about the discharge on the golf course. The city of Benson has put that in writing as well, so I'd be happy to provide you with that. And then the other question for you with water is, are they going to be discharging any processed fluids to the ground without any protection? Are there going to be lined ponds or tanks on the property?
First question, quick clarification with the city of Benson. Did they say that that water would be gray water from the facility directly to the golf course, or reuse water from the Benson plant to the golf course? Gotcha, yeah, and that's what I presume would happen. So the Benson wastewater plant, that's what the permit would exist for that general demand, so not get that. If they go the other route where it's a gray water process straight from the plant, that would be regulated under a different kind of permit. So we'll catch you either way. City of Benson has not yet. Yeah. What was your other question? I forgot. I'm sorry. Oh, it was about discharge. Yes. No, because they're discharging to the sewer, they're not going to have any line bonds. Yeah, so that's our understanding. However, if they did start discharging to the ground, if they discharge into ponds, if they injected into the ground, treated water to the ground, all that would be stuff that would require a permit. Those are permitting actions if there's any sort of possible impact.
I guess we'll just hope they self-report any of those changes as well. Okay, last question. Example, aluminum oxide solid material, if so, what is their makeup, proposed volumes, location of storage, and protection methods of storage from stormwater runoff.
Okay, so will any of the substances be stored on site? Is kind of what you're saying, solid waste?
Yeah, so I'm speaking a little bit out of my current capacity. It's been a decade since I was in the waste program, so presumably they will be storing materials on site. They have to characterize those, send to landfills as appropriate, or hazardous waste landfills that Daniel talked about earlier, methodology. So I can't say offhand right now, but that is a regulated activity, both the storage of solid waste, disposal of solid waste, and the characterization of that waste to make sure it ends up in the right.
And then am I just forgetting, did he acknowledge, has that been covered by ADEQ, the solid waste, and was it deemed that they wouldn't need additional permits for that?
We don't have anything waste related right now as far as a permit, is that accurate? It hasn't been submitted, is what you said. Great. Yeah, there are a lot of questions. Yep.
Let's write that one down.
Okay, I think next is Representative, oh, you want to pass?
I want to give my time over to others to speak.
That's fine.
Comments, great questions.
Thank you, Representative Diaz. All right, we have next then Tom Wilson, questions about decriminalizing and environmental hazards, Michelle Hamlin, violations, Jean Renick, emissions and permits. So Tom, come on up, sir.
How you all doing? I have about 2.5 questions, so I'll try to make it fast. One of the questions, the main one I have is, has there been a geologic survey done on the substrate of your building facility?
Geologic survey on the substrate, but I don't have a permit in water.
Not to our knowledge, but I think that would be more applicable probably to the zoning questions and the building code questions, which are outside of our jurisdiction.
The reason why I asked that is, I know the geology in the area real well, and I'm concerned about the fault lines. I pick out fault lines every day practically, and what I'm concerned about is your substrate. My guess, between 280 to 300 feet thick of sandrock, gravel, and gypsum. There's no bedrock. Anytime there's vibration going on, constant vibration with the furnaces, with the starting of the motors and the constant vibration going on there, that could do a little shaking. And if there's any substrate that sinks, because between the distance of the San Pedro River and about 3.5 miles away on either side, you have sinkholes. Then you have what they call ground fissures. In these ground fissures, they can give way any minute. So, considering that, also, we're on a slight seismic belt. So that means there's a possibility of earthquakes. You just never know. And so that's my concern there. We have no bedrock. We are sliding into the San Pedro River, millimeters, maybe centimeters every year. We can't stop it. We live basically on a sandhill.
Thank you. So was there a question there? I'm so sorry.
Will there be, or is there, a geologic survey evident on
Okay. Is that something that goes back to zoning? Because that doesn't sound like water. That wouldn't be water or air. It has to do with the building codes. Yes, go ahead.
Question here for the gentleman there. Second. At what time during the day do you do your air quality surveys? They're correct.
You mean like inspections?
Yeah, what time of day?
We don't go at a set time or set day. We try to be responsive, and sometimes, there's an important question. If we get a complaint, from some in the community saying that, hey, they're seeing a certain pattern at a certain time of the day. We would try to ensure that we are out there, to see what may be going on at that time of the day. So we don't have a set pattern where we show up at the facility at 8 a.m. It doesn't work like that. There have been times when we actually select plans late at night.
Okay, the reason why I asked that is because the particulates, especially nitric oxide and, CO2 and all that, by the time, the temperature drops below 55 degrees or whatever, that stuff settles. It settles lower to the valleys, and it hangs out and it lingers there.
Yeah.
Any condensation, that's going to draw it even lower, and that's going to settle probably right into the soil, into the farmland, whatever. So I have a challenge there for you. Make a survey of just between Apache Powder on Highway 80 and between Cowboy Lane in that area. It's pretty low. I challenge you to do your surveys over there. And I challenge you to do that at least 4 times a year. That way, we get every meeting on the work quality, and then you'll have solid numbers. Okay?
That's good feedback. Thank you.
I think that's a helpful suggestion. Thank you, Tom. I think that really helps steer our team. So thank you, sir. Okay, so Michelle, come on. Oh, that's more EHS related things, but they've taken that down. Is that accurate? Yeah, they're taking it down for sure.
Okay, firstly, the question about using actual numbers rather than theoretical for your modeling. This is for the audience here. I have a name for you, Dr. Stephen Petty. Dr. Stephen Petty is a forensic engineer and environmental health and safety industrial hygienist. That is who we need, because he deals in actual numbers. When the Palestine train derailment happened, he went there. So he is a fantastic patriot. So that's there. Also, in 1988, Congress passed a law declaring the San Pedro riparian area a protected area. Unfortunately, Benson opted out of that. And so it actually starts just south of Benson in the St. David area. And so my question is, has that been factored into your modeling of the impact of any of what we're talking about here on that federally protected area?
So the question is, have we considered the impact of the riparian reserve? Is that right? In St. David? Is that accurate? And then, go ahead, say it again.
Yeah. So the law that Congress passed in 1988 protects the San Pedro River riparian area, the entire ecosystem, including the aquifer, all the way through St. David to the Mexican border. So it's a huge responsibility that we have as a community to protect that, because the people south of us are counting on it, including Mexico. So that's what I'm asking.
So have we considered what effects this will have downstream, is what I hear you saying. Okay. Upstream, I apologize. Whatever the direction is that I don't know, because I'm not from this community, I really apologize. Go ahead. Just south, there we go. I got that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I worked on a model for this facility. So this is just a small snippet for the moment.
Yeah, we get far. It's hard to hear.
Is this better? So yeah, this is just a small snippet of the model we did. The actual modeling domain extended for 50 kilometers, so it includes, San Pedro River, up north and down south. So impacts, to air quality, and got a fairly narrow scope that we modeled. It's just air impacts. But we did do the whole area. So it's a 50 kilometer area.
Any additional questions?
Yes. So the violations were already asked about. I think we all have a pretty clear picture about that. But I wanted to talk about the process that ADEQ does. And I'm going to use the Cottonwood facility of MRI as the case study. most of you probably don't know about Cottonwood and MRI. MRI is Mineral Resources Incorporated. They're not the same type of plant at all, but the comparison is in ADEQ's processes. Okay, so just to give you kind of a 40,000-foot view of start to finish here, but there's no finish for Cottonwood, pray for them. Okay, so they were, MRI was given a conditional use permit, and then there were some violations. They had falsified information on that conditional use permit, so they had a violation from the city about that. There were a total of 16 violations that were combined between the city violations, ADEQ issued ones, and PDEQ. So it was total violations. What has happened was, when the residents filed formal complaints and finally they were investigated, there was a revocation of the permit. And you would think, yay, win. No. ADEQ issued a different permit so that the emissions were okay. So they went from a general permit to a, I believe it was called level 2 permit, because they found that the falsification of the information on the conditional use permit was not the accurate permit that the company was asking for. So they were emitting too much dust, and when that was found, 9 years later it took for that switch to a different permit. So I bring this up as this is what we're talking about when we say the self-monitoring and the reporting and the complaints that the community have been filing. We don't want to be Cottonwood after the fact dealing with the cleanup. Yeah.
Because I know, Balaji, you've been involved in Cottonwood, or Daniel, did you want to handle that? Speak to that maybe a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you for the comment. I didn't hear a question.
But did you have a question per se?
Yeah, thank you. Could you explain if you've learned any lessons? Because somebody actually mentioned that there were lessons learned because your department, what you guys do is new-ish, and so you're learning about how to fine-tune those. So
This is new, not what they do in the permit. This is just me.
okay, so what can we learn from what the situation that Cottonwood is in about as a community, you know, what kind of recourse is there or anything that you guys can offer, and also what things are in place so that there is some safety nets so that doesn't happen?
Great question, and I don't know how familiar you are with the MRI and Cottonwood, situation, but it is, we don't have enough time to go through it here, right? But we did learn some lessons, right? So, ADEQ did issue the wrong permit initially, and we're working to correct that through the legal system and other options following statute and law rule. We also heard community concern, and we did a community monitoring project out there to understand what potential contamination may have left the MRI site, right? So we did air monitoring, we did soil monitoring. I don't think we did water monitoring, and we're working on the health conservation with the
AHS.
With ADHS, the Department of Health Services, to try to understand that, right? So we are stepping forward, moving forward, and trying to get the answers, right? And we're still in the analysis. The permit has not been issued. Clarify for like they're operating on our permit shield, so it's kind of different, right? So we're still inspecting them, we're still doing unannounced inspections, we're still holding them accountable, right? So we are following the legal process statute as well and addressing the situation and doing an analysis to provide information to the community and more information to them. We're not done with it. Our investigation or the department more out to the community, but yeah, we will be here. Through the process, follow the rules, statutes, and, answer the community. If and when the facility is built here, you have file complaints, call us, let us know, that is what we hear. I came here, I got my finding, session and findings, we are here to respond to questions, I've got to follow what's actually on.
Thank you, Michelle. We are going to need to wrap up with the next person, just because we are getting close to the 9 o'clock time period. We need to wrap the meeting generally with some comments from Aaron and from Daniel. So, Jean, you'll be our last speaker. Jean, are you here? Jean Green. Did I get that right? Green. Okay, I guess we can go to the next person then. Mike Zikchek. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Mike? Okay. Darby Getzweiler? Sounds like some people have left, so we're sorry about that. Misty Bloom? Do we have Misty here? Oh, are you Misty? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thanks for coming out, Misty.
Okay, I just want to address you guys first. I recognize the difficult position you all are in. It's Arizona's job to protect the people from polluters first and foremost. But you are in the position to give polluters permission. Talk about a rock and a hard place. It's a very difficult position you guys are in. I hope you consider us when you think of however the process that would approve it. It sounds like that's a done deal, but think of us. Okay. It is required by law that the permit is practically enforceable by the public. This gentleman, forgive me, I forgot your name, but the first gentleman over here. I'm sorry. Admitted that the numbers are theoretical. ADI supplies the numbers and ADEQ doesn't deny permits. Do I understand that correctly? That's what I've heard so far. At the very beginning.
I said, I'm unaware of this denying permit. We've not denied permit since I've been in air quality commissioner. And what I said is they have an opportunity to make modifications to the permit if information is identified by ADEQ during the public comment period, and we want to make modifications and they can meet the requirements of state and federal law.
Okay, I did hear the theoretical numbers thing, and that's horrifying as a resident to hear.
And it's theoretical numbers because they're not operating at this point, right? So we've got numbers that can say that they're going to be, we've got mission calculations and package from the equipment. We have all that stuff. So until they actually operate and they're doing monitoring, and we see actually the comments through and through code. So this is like
it's offensive.
or something. But until we have that, it's theoretical. That's why we need the monitoring. That's why there's a reporting. Because we will have real numbers once it gets to the operate.
Not to be philosophical, but is there such thing as a not static, like, these numbers are not static, and they never will be static, and it's dependent on many factors, and that's actually what I was gonna bring up too. Not to cut you off, I know we're in a hurry here. Okay, so what I was gonna say is, the numbers are theoretical, ADI supplies the numbers, and ADEQ doesn't deny permits. How can you therefore promise safety to the residents of Benson if these contaminant levels are theory? And how does this follow Arizona law that dictates it must be enforceable? How is this permit enforceable as a practical matter by the public as written into AZ law, which that's been asked a few times, so it's okay if you don't answer. One thing that I noticed when the hydrogen chloride slide popped up at the beginning, it doesn't seem to reflect a static number. I mean, I've lived here for 7 years. And so we all understand the wind, and Kimberly spoken, mentioned the wind. Like, we who live on ranches, we understand our deserts. And our desert isn't static. Like, we get to know, it's like the ocean. You really can't predict the movement of the ocean, it does what it wants. And that is the nature of the desert. The waters do what they want. We respect it. And so this, to me, when I look at this, as a student, as a researcher myself,
green part. So, yeah, let me see my comment on that. Sorry to not be clear here. Okay, it does not seem to reflect the static number. Wind is a factor of monsoonal weather, which could accumulate hydrogen chloride disproportionately across this valley. What varying factors were considered with the values on the slide you showed, and how? I'd like to note that OSHA standard for the workplace is 5 parts per million for hydrogen chloride.
When I put up the slide, I talked about the HCL, the first line. It was not projected a snapshot of time. It really is representative of the market over a span of time. At one point, we talked about using meteorological data over a 3-year span. So essentially, you take into account multiple meteorological phenomena over a 3-year span. So you're trying to figure out what happens over a span of lengthy period of time to see how the impacts change. So what we're showing here is when you mark through all the different scenarios, these are what we expect to be like the worst case.
Well, that doesn't really make any sense to me because the accumulation is going to be so varied. Like what we know about science, what we know about how the wind, you're going to have heavy accumulation in one area, one day, in 1 hour. There will be consolidated parts per million. Like that's not like you can't just stick a pin on a map and say this is where all the bad stuff's going to be. And there's children in that green part. I homeschool, but I'm 3 miles east of it.
So when we show these concentrations on this kind of a map, I'm not implying that the only locations where there are hydrogen chloride measured are those locations. We just put it as a frame of reference because we want to pick out the most sensitive locations. Because there is the nursing home, as you know, Cafeteria, nursing home, and then there is the Benson Hospital Rehab Center, and then the school. We just pick these 3 locations. For example, we are not saying that there will be no concentration elsewhere around the Benson area.
So it could be true with that logic that you just stated, that since there's variability, it could actually be much greater concentration at a different given time.
Not much higher. There will be some level of concentration, but not much higher. Because when we model, like Michael talked about, we model over a grid. We don't model specific spots. We span out a lengthy diagram around the facility. Because we are spanning out, we are putting receptors, that's what we use in model, which are closely spaced. So we can say from a model, at every single one of these receptors, what is the expected concentration?
So I think we're looking at things a little bit differently, because I'm looking at it as a control and a variable, and I only see variable here.
Yeah.
So like that's,
There is one takeaway that I can communicate is you see the number in the facility boundary of 0016. You see it? From the original dynamics project, the mid hydrogen chloride modeling, that is the single highest expected concentration.
over a 3-year span,
Around the entire.
like gathered over a 3-year span.
Over the year
That's
span.
the model.
Right, that's the model.
Right.
And the other takeaway is, as you get farther away, those concentrations keep dissipating in this model.
So, yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, but I totally disagree with you just because of the variability of where the wind takes particulate. I mean, it can concentrate in a lot of different places. You can actually concentrate right there because there's no predictability, right? I mean, generally.
Yeah, so this is the lead along with it. So this is the highest one level concentration. So the way these air models work is it takes, we use 3 years of data. We use every hour of every year of those 3 years. Right, so every year we have 8,760 scenarios. Right, this is, of all those scenarios that we model, this is the worst one. Right, so that's what we're showing here. And for every one of those scenarios, we model thousands of points. So this is the worst case. So this is could be, typically we see the higher concentrations at night during static conditions. A lot of folks that you can visualize that where accumulating, you see it we're capturing that in the model because we're running so many simulations with capturing that data. The other thing is that hour by hour, the concentration zones don't keep like you don't get pockets where hydrochloric will accumulate and build up, right? So we model each hour separately. That just helps.
I wish I had a pocket. I wish I had a monitor so I know what was coming. Thank you for your answer. But I do want to say that the OSHA standard for the workplace is 5 parts per million for hydrogen chloride. So I'll let you really smart math people figure out how that compares. One more question, okay? How deep will the stacks go into the ground? And is this gonna? It's a general overview question. This little thing. It'll be quick. How deep will the stacks go into the ground, and is this going to come into contact with groundwater? How will this plant prevent groundwater contamination? How does this not qualify for the necessity of an aquifer protection permit preemptively? And also, it would seem that a surface water ADEQ, I think I said that right, permit would be necessary because if the particulates released into the air 1/10 of a mile away from a river over time, that would be a heavy particulate load. Sorry, was that way too many questions? Okay. So it sounds like the stacks, I'm guessing, just from a construction perspective, when you get a T-post, you have to drive in the ground far, right? So I'm a rancher, so I understand that. You have to drive, the farther you get down to the ground, the more it is in the middle. So stacks, how far are they going down? Will it affect groundwater? And how can you guys assure that the groundwater right on the river won't be contaminated by whatever they are, line cooling towers or whatever?
So the question is, how far down do the stacks go? Will it contaminate groundwater, you said?
Will it be at the water table? And that's, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, the question about this foundation of the status, how far down? Curious about, well, sorry. Yeah, again, air quality and voice. I mean, the water contamination is valid.
Ready? Yeah, I'm not aware how deep they would go. I can't think of any instance where we had to issue an ADEQ for stack foundation being below the surface, but no. But if it turned out that they were discharging, or that's probably a big discharge, course, it's going to be regulated, but it's just not something I've heard of before. But we'll take a look at the plan just to see if anything looks funky. ADEQs are required prior to discharge. Surface water will be prior to discharge. Excellent. All right, so thank you all for coming tonight. Good conversation, lots of questions, lots of good questions. We hope this has been illuminating. We are trying to get out to communities and speak with people about these concerns that exist surrounding things that are coming to communities. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here, and I can't remember, are you on first, Aaron, or is Daniel? Okay, so we'll have Daniel give us some closing thoughts here, and then Aaron's going to wrap up the night just with some final things. So.
Good luck, everyone. We're fun.
I want to echo Justin. Thank you for attending. I really appreciate you guys coming out. Appreciate the large crowd, but a lot of people out there. Also want to thank Benson High School for allowing us to have this community meeting here. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the engagement. Thank you for your passion. Right? I heard your passion about the player, right? So we are here to explain the process. Hopefully you learned something today. Please submit your comments. Please submit your comments to us, right? If you didn't ask your question, you want to be able to know record, you want us to respond, please submit those questions to us in writing. Either email, smart comments, which I've done, US mail, or you can come here, 2 weeks from tonight for the public hearing and verbally, say your comments, hand them in writing at that point. Every comment we receive, we will respond, we will read, we will respond, so please, let us know your questions and concerns. It doesn't matter how you send your comment, right, so if you can't get here next Monday, you can send it to mail, right, they're all, every single one, there's no difference to it, one or the other.
After the instruction,
you should, so yes, you submit, yeah, well, we're going to take each comment, right, so you already submitted one, you got to move the comment, right, you can get the same, so whatever, right? No, and I'll let you name that, so I'm not going to.
You can do it, yeah.
So please, I strongly encourage you to do that. We want to hear from the community. That is why we're here. That's why my team is here. That's why water quality is here, right? We may not have the answers that you like. We may not like our answers, but we heard you on the way. Right?
So,
We still have questions. Those of us that were not able to have the questions answered.
We need to know
How
how
will
to.
that work? Who do we get in touch with?
So we're going to questions right now. Please talk to my team. We're going to be here for a little bit, right? So anyone that did not have any questions answered, we're going to be here for a little bit. I'm not going to how long we're going to be. We're going back to Phoenix tonight.
Oh,
for a
man.
while. We will answer questions, right?
and then Aaron's also going to talk about the way that you can submit your comments so that you have a chance to go through us, just as Daniel said, we're going to do this. So go ahead.
Thanks, Justin. I wanted to say in closing tonight's meeting that we do value the community and your time coming out here tonight, all your questions and concerns. We really think that open dialogue is important to this continued progress on these issues, especially in matters as important as air quality and water quality. We're here to give you the information that you need to make meaningful comments, so please take that opportunity during this period. The formal period doesn't end on August 21st. We have the same formal comment public hearing on that date. So all the way up until then, and then all those comments there, they're going to be included in a formal response in this summary, and then we'll reach out and we'll answer all those questions. Again, if there are any questions that you haven't been able to ask tonight during our Q&A, we've got folks sticking around, please ask them your questions. And we're going to provide those of you who signed up with updates, 4 updates on the sign-in sheet with those updates. And they're going to go through the permitting process as goes. Reminder again that our cards are available for air quality and my card personally. You can always reach out by email and give comments. And there's also other ADEQ contacts available. There's the link to the permit webpage where you can find all those permit documents that also helps you make meaningful comments. The link to the smart comments, including that QR code at the bottom of your agenda and the bit.ly link. That's really your best way to leave comments. I would heavily suggest you use that formal comment portal. And you can write as many comments as you would like. Again, it's not one comment and that's it. And please take that home with you for the materials we gave to you tonight home with you. And with that, I'm going to say safe travels to everybody, and again,